Are we ready to roll?
Ready to rock
Hey,
and roll. Oh my
everybody,
God.
what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Live from the Vinyl Room. Today we're joined with our two guests, Jim Plotnick and Mark. I screwed up
All right,
already.
we'll help
Jim
you.
Summaria
Correct.
and
Mark
Mark
Plotnick.
Plotnick. Sorry.
And we rehearsed that, too.
Yeah, right, I know. See, that's why, because I tried to do it too hard.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm bad at names. I'm sorry. Anyways, Mark is a writer. Jim is a photographer. They've been doing this for years now. We'll get into that in a little bit. But guys, why don't you say hello? Tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Well, hello. I'm Jim Summaria. Yeah, I got that right. And I'm
Thank
the
God.
photographer, and this is...
Mark Plotnick. I'm the writer.
And our book is Classic Rock Photographs from Yesterday and Today, which features photos of a lot of classic rock artists from the 70s. The book does not contain all the acts, but the ones I was allowed to photograph. And the second part is the Today section, which is photographs of the same classic, most of the same classic rock artists who are still performing today. And I've been doing this since '73.
I've been writing early on in my career for various companies. I started playing keyboards at the age of 7, and I've been a rock and blues devotee my whole life. And when Jim approached me a few years ago and said, I have this book idea. I could use you as a writer, and you know music, and you know the language, and it'll be fun. And I said, sure, let's do it. And we spent about 4 years, Jim.
Getting it all set together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I had all the photos from the '70s. The hard part was getting the photos of all these guys today, all these artists. So it all was me contacting the managers as they were playing some venues out in the Chicagoland area, and for the most part they were very good about it, but it was very slow going, and I knew I had to get something going to get more of these artists. So the Arcada Theater in St. Charles, which is owned by Ron Onesti, I approached him, and he gave me a pass to any show I want, because they were getting sometimes 5, 6, 7 bands a month from the classic rock era. So between him and Lou Bellotti, who's the chief photographer, I get to go to any show and photograph them. For example, I got Artemis Pyle of Leonard Skinner this week. I just did Blue Oyster Cult, Tommy James and the Shondells, et cetera, et cetera.
Felix
Cavaliere of the Rascals was just there. So bottom line is, and that's just in the last couple weeks. And,
Right.
So that really added to the second part of the book, which there's no writing in the second part, but all the facts that Mark has are in the beginning of the book. And I think there's over 60 artists in the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
Everyone from, of course, Zeppelin, Who, Stones, McCartney, all the way to people like Golden Earring, Jay Giles, Montrose,
Slade,
Savoy
That's
Brown.
amazing.
So again, the book is not a complete history of classic rock, because I didn't photograph everyone. For example, there's no Leonard Skinner in there, which I wish we had, or Deep Purple. It's no slight against them. I just didn't get photo passes. And just to give you a little background how the photo passes started back in '73, is I started going to concerts, and I was taking pictures with my Kodak Instamatic, which had a flash cube on it. But back in those days, we had a place called the Kinetic Playground where you could actually walk right up to the stage and take some pictures. So I did that, and the pictures were getting better and better. And the photo store I was bringing everything to said, these are pretty cool shots. You should get a 35 millimeter camera. This is like '72. And I said, what's a 35 millimeter camera? I had no clue.
Right.
So back then I went to Sears. Where else did you go to buy stuff back in the day? So I went to Sears and I bought a 35 millimeter camera. And my pictures got better and better. And to tell you the truth, I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I was winging it. So,
Fake it till you make it.
Right. So I started reading up on it and got better. Anyway, the story gets better when my friend and I, Gary, decided to go down to St. Louis to see Led Zeppelin. Snuck on the main floor.
Nice.
And I got these great shots of Zeppelin. And I mean, they were sharp, and they told the story of how the concert felt, and really good shots. So I went to my local store called Flipside Records, and the manager, Rich Carlson, said, "Yeah, I'll put these up on the wall. Maybe we could sell a couple." He said, "Anytime you do a concert, bring them in." Now, see, in those days, you could go up to the stage and take pictures. Can't do that anymore.
Yeah, right.
So I did that for the next concert and the next concert, and he said, "Hey, a lot of people don't know this, but we are the promoters of the concerts, Flipside Production. Would you like to be our official photographer?"
Sweet.
And I said, "What do you need from me?" "Well, you give us a 5x7, we'll get you backstage. And, I just got to, clear it with the bosses, Larry and Carl Rosenbaum, who owned Flipside, and they agreed." So I was 19 years old, and all of a sudden I was buying tickets for shows, trying to get a good seat, and now I'm backstage meeting these guys and photographing them.
That's awesome.
And that's how it all started. And I started taking classes in photography and got better and better, and that was it.
Nice.
That's the beginning.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting aspects of the book, and this is the kind of feedback Jim and I get, is that the book includes a lot of lesser-known, overlooked bands, and I spent a lot of time researching, going way back in the archives of interviews with musicians going back to the mid-'60s.
Nice.
Digging out interviews, reviews, etc. And I begin to find that these little-known bands had so many interesting stories, and they were worth telling. And all this respect that I began to get for the bands that were not in the Hall of Fame, and I just think that's one of the nice things about our book, is because we get to talk about a lot of the bands that maybe a lot of people don't know about. And
Right.
again,
No,
we get,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to have Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones and so forth, and Jim has got some amazing photographs of them in the book. But there's also photographs of guys like Ronnie Montrose and Todd Rundgren and these types of people. And the feedback we get is people really enjoy seeing these lesser known because they don't get written about
Yeah, you don't
much.
really hear much.
No, and they've all got great stories, whether it's about their music, how they name the bands, things in their life, that I found very interesting. And that's what I enjoyed probably most about doing the book. It was these artists, more than almost the big guys like the Claptons and the Who's and so forth.
Right, you want to get these lesser-known stories out to the people.
Yeah.
I mean, just me personally, dealing with the store and everything, and I'm a trivia nut about all kinds of rock and roll stories and band stories. It's the ones that you never hear about are the most fun to tell because people are blown away. Oh, wow, I never knew that. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And for instance, Niels Lofgren is in our book. He's one of the other guitar players with Springsteen's E Street Band.
Right.
And I read a lot of firsthand interviews about his recollections with Bruce and the kind of discipline Bruce demands. And I found that so fascinating because I learned a ton about Bruce Springsteen and how he conducts his band and the music from Niels. And also his life is fascinating. So these were the things I got excited about as I was doing the writing of the book.
Sure, and he's a guy, let's face it, when you talk about Bruce Springsteen, especially back in the day, it was either Bruce or the sax player Clarence.
Exactly.
You didn't talk about Niles so
no,
people
or Little
really
Steven,
didn't know. Right,
and so forth.
Until he came into his own.
Yeah.
So no, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and another interesting story is, going back, there's been so much written about the Rolling Stones, of course, and, I've read Keith Richards' book and read hundreds upon hundreds of interviews that the Stones have done over the years. And one of the things that I learned was one of the key members that really kept that band together at the beginning was Stu, the piano player.
Right.
He drove the van. He hustled for gigs. He kept the electricity on by doing odd jobs. He was also a phenomenal rock and roll piano player, and you can hear his piano on Get Your Yayas Out.
Great
the,
album.
The great album. And so these are the kind of stories. And Keith Richards was devastated when Stu died. And these are the kind of stories that I think a lot interesting, more than the ones that everyone hears about all the time. About
every
the
day.
Stones, so.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I totally agree. So, tell us then, Jim. Before we really dive into the book, you had mentioned about hooking up with the record store, and they got you going with taking pictures of shows and stuff. Where else maybe were your photos being like on display other than there?
Well, I do sell to a lot of magazines. I'm a contributor to Premier Guitar, which is an American magazine, and Good Times in Germany. They run a lot of my photos, but my photos have also been in a lot of books. For example, The Who, cover of the latest one on The Who.
Very
Tommy
cool.
Bolin. I've been in a lot of books.
Smithsonian Institute put out a book.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the Smithsonian, kind of the history of rock and roll, and they are using, which photographs, Jim, are they using?
It'll be in one of that we're going to be showing shortly.
Okay.
But what I'm so proud of that picture is that this was an international contest to get photos into this book, Smithsonian, and they only chose 3 pictures, and one was mine. To represent the Rolling Stones.
That's
and
amazing.
One was from the 60s and mine from the 70s. So it's in this huge book that Smithsonian Institute put out.
How did you get that connection?
It was a contest.
Oh, you just sent it in?
Yeah, I just sent it in.
Nice.
And then a lot of CDs, the Montrose first album reissue, Robin Trower first album reissue. I have a lot of my photos. Savoy Brown's new album called City Nights has 35 of my photos in it.
Wow.
Big fold out. My pictures have been shown at the Grammys and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when Moody Blues were put in. It was my picture of John Lodge, and the Grammys it was Johnny Winter.
Yeah. Johnny Winter.
So yeah, they've kind of been all over the place, which is very exciting.
Yeah,
all over the web.
That's
And
amazing.
that's why I'm working on my $10th million now by selling all these pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, it doesn't pay a lot, but it just is cool.
The love and the passion,
Yeah.
right? And then you cover the rest as you go along.
Right.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch real quick too, because you kind of mentioned it earlier when you first got started about taking pictures at shows and just the difference then how it is now. Because I'm assuming pretty much, and even when I was growing up too, you could go and you could take video, picture, then nobody cared.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's a big no-no at a lot of shows. So how did you have to go about, like, to get permission, and did you talk to the bands, or?
No, and back in the 70s, it was so easy. As I said, we had the Kinetic Playground, but if you were at the amphitheater, for example, you could go up to the usher and ask them, can I go up and take a couple shots? And they would let you. My Bob Dylan picture is that exactly.
What utopia was this?
This was in the 70s.
Yeah, yeah, is it okay? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then you go back to your seat. And then when I got backstage, I was allowed to shoot the entire show. What was starting to happen in the late 70s was getting a little bit more corporate. And all of a sudden you're talking to tour managers. And
Right.
one of the reasons I stopped in 78, the last show I did was Heart. And the tour manager came up to me and said, I want you to send me all your slides or all your pictures, and I will send back the ones I think you should be able to keep. So it got to be, you could shoot the first 3 songs, and that's it. And then send us the pictures. So after that, I just said, forget about it. I
Right.
stopped doing it. And I wish I didn't, because, I missed out on so many more bands.
Sure.
But, I was doing 2-3 shows a week, and it just... And plus, I started my new career as a corporate photographer at that time. And today it's at the Arcada. I pretty much have free reign, but every once in a while you get a band saying first 3 songs, last song, whatever it is. But for the most part, they're all really cool. It's rare you get turned down to take pictures.
To show you how difficult it is, it's progressively getting more and more difficult. I attended a concert at Ravinia, which is an outdoor amphitheater and lawn seating in the northern suburb of
Ravinia
Chicago.
Theater, yeah, very nice
And
place.
it's a great venue. And I know the guys in the opening band. I don't know if people remember the Flock from Chicago.
God.
Their most famous musician is Jerry Goodman, who
Right.
played with the Mahavishnu Orchestra and Jan Hammer and has done soundtracks and whatever. And I've gotten to reconnect with him. He was a neighbor of mine. I went to the same elementary school as him. So they were opening at Ravinia for Steely Dan. And I asked the band if Jim could shoot them. And I learned how strict Ravinia now, if you dare hold up a cell phone, they will take your cell phone and they will eject you immediately from the venue.
That's
And
ridiculous.
throughout, oh my God, I was just talking. Pete, hi.
I was coming.
All right. And we were just talking about Ravinia and the camera rules there. We have a famous musician in the house here. And I'll let you introduce
go
him.
ahead.
Okay.
You're on a roll.
Okay. Pete Flynn
Yeah, Pete.
from Dinosaur Exhibit is here.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
They recently opened for Steely Dan, and they're very well known in their own right. And
How you doing?
All right, man.
Good.
I was just telling our listeners how strict Ravinia is in terms of photography.
Yes.
Yeah, and being in the audience, Pete and Tim and Joel, people, they were walking around with signs warning people and making announcements before the show. And, people generally don't listen. They don't care.
Yeah.
And every time someone took out a camera, they got really serious and they were kicking people out. So we were talking about over the years the legalities, Jim, the challenges he faces as a rock and roll photographer and how dealing with the venues and the managers. So
Yeah, like I said, the only band I ever photographed at Ravinia was the Bodines, and I had to shoot from behind the audience. So I had to use a 300 millimeter, and this was for a magazine, and I had all the permission from the Bodines and everybody. So I haven't been back to the Ravinia. The Arcada is the best place for me, but I also, when I want to shoot some people, I contact the management, and some of the management are just absolutely wonderful. I got to photograph Jorma Kokkonen, I can never say his name right, from Jefferson Airplane,
Right.
at the space. They were wonderful. Another wonderful management was John Sebastian. He played at a small place in Schaumburg in Illinois.
Very cool.
So a lot of times I really get, some really, really nice people.
Encourage you to take pictures.
Yeah, and for example, and I'll name names, George Thorogood played at Arcada last night, and photos weren't allowed.
Right.
So I just turned the car around and went home.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Pete, you want to
yeah,
join
come on,
us?
Pete.
Sure.
Not only is Pete a great drummer, he plays guitar and he's a phenomenal guitar technician.
Pete's been in with one of his bands and do podcasts for us.
Hi, we've met before. How are you?
And you and your
That's cool.
what a surprise! What a surprise!
And it's funny, he
Here
was
you
talking
go,
about
Pete.
Dinosaur
Pete,
Exhibit as
come
you
on.
walked in. It's like good timing.
Have a seat, buddy. Good to see you, man. Thanks for coming in.
How are you doing?
Pleasure. Great to meet
Right.
you.
Nice to meet you.
See, you never know who's gonna pop in
Really?
that black circle.
Wow!
That's right.
And
Yeah.
here, and we even have the dog here.
Lola, of
Hey,
course.
Lola, hello.
So here's kind of a neat question, and this, because Joel being a photographer too, I know he runs into this problem with everybody posting everything and anything in the world on like Facebook and
yeah.
Instagram now. Do you see people like trying to snake your pictures and use them for their own, like blot out your name if it's on it or something?
When I put something on Facebook, I put my the title of the book, I put my website, and then I decreased the size of it by quite a bit. So in other words, if someone wanted to print something, it's 1 inch by 2 inches.
Right.
So you're not going to get anything more than a wallet-sized photo out of
Yeah.
it. So
Well,
that's how I
that's
get
good,
around
'cause
that.
Like I say, I know like Joel being a photographer, I know that he has had that problem a few times. People using the photos to take, and that's great and everything, but he's not getting any credit, or that he took the photo, or not, you know what I mean?
Well, I'll tell you, Tim. We have these promotional T-shirts.
And that's a very nice shirt. Too.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
How about my shirt?
So,
You can see Zeppelin anytime.
Oh,
so
No.
sorry.
Jim and I, or Jim's going, I don't like that color you have, or I like that color. Could you get me this one in the charcoal with it? So I went back to the company that makes the T-shirts, and I'm online, and I'm uploading the image. It's not going through. And I get an email from the company that says, we've just been flagged. This photograph here, and the person, this is Rory Gallagher, the guitar player.
Right.
We think there's copyright infringement
Oh,
here. We may have to notify a credit card company. I said, true story. This just happened a couple days ago. And I went back to them and I said, wait a minute. This is our book. I wrote the
Yeah,
book.
right.
This is the photographer's. We have permission. We have a book out. Well, Mr. Plotnick, you'll have to upload all this to our website for our approval. So they're getting more strict because Jim has found his photographs
Everywhere.
sort of like manipulated with Photoshop and turned into other things. And I see postings all the time on all these rock and roll sites on Facebook I belong to. And everybody's posting other people's photographs without giving credit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It never ends. And being an artist myself and understanding that, anytime we post a picture, we always post who the photographer is. Of course, granted, if we know who it is. So, we try to respect that every chance we can get, because we understand it's just like any other art form.
Right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Everybody's getting ripped off and not getting paid.
Yeah.
That's like a normal thing.
So-
it's
What's great is most of the time I know who the people are. I haven't met Jim yet. This is my first time, but Mark and I have now. We've shared a few shows together
Nice.
and some time together. So it's great to meet people. It's awesome.
I just have a Rory Gallagher story really quick. When we were doing Mark and I did a mock-up of the book. So I was kind of promoting on Facebook that we were going to do this book, and we knew this was going to be the cover for a multitude of reasons. Somehow, some way, Rory Gallagher's nephew, who's in charge of his estate, saw this. And he wrote me an email and just said, "We are so thrilled that you're thinking of putting my uncle on the cover."
That's amazing.
And I said, "Well, gee, how'd you even find out?" He says, "Somehow someone sent it to me through Facebook, blah, blah, blah." So by the time we were going to publish, our publisher, Amherst, said, "I need photo releases for who's on the cover and who's on the back." I said, "Okay." So I contacted them, and they were, again, thrilled. And they said they were so happy they put it on their website.
Nice.
So that's Rory Gallagher that, some people are thrilled.
Oh, that's fantastic.
To be on the cover.
When we first met, that was the first thing I said was, "Oh my God,
Yeah,
you
right.
got Rory Gallagher on the cover." That's
Nobody
amazing.
does that. That's
Yeah,
Right,
really.
right.
Yeah.
And he is so revered in Ireland. And just one thing I wanted to mention about Rory, that I don't know if your listeners remember, but Northern Ireland was a very, very violent and dangerous place
Yes, it was.
back in the day. And Rory was one of the few rock and roll musicians who went back to Belfast and performed. And he wanted to give inspiration and hope to the young people, in Belfast at that time. And it was a great thing to do, and it was a very selfless thing to do, and that's
Right.
one of the things I recall that I really like about him.
Yeah, I was to say, because wasn't it a time where, they did, his management, whatever, didn't even want him doing any kind of shows?
Well, it was dangerous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What
exactly,
it was.
because all the rioting and everything going on.
But being the blue collar guy that he was, he just
Yes.
went in there and did
Right.
it. And my Yeah, my encounter with Rory in 1985 is that through Flynn Guitars, I was bringing him some of our guitars to check out. He was playing at the Metro.
Sweet.
He was playing at the Metro in Chicago. So we met him backstage in the dressing room, and we were his guests for the day. I mean, he was a sweetheart. And we took pictures in the dressing room. I think 2 survive out of the whole roll because funny again with pictures and rights and all that stuff. So we get a seat in the audience for the show. And actually, the drummer didn't show up for sound check, so I got to play the drums for sound
Oh,
check.
for real?
So that
How
was
cool
like
is
one of the
that?
great all-time highs, you know, like, wow. But Rory he was such an awesome host, and he had beers from all over the world lined up on the table in the dressing room, and and he just kept telling his roadie, go get some more beers. He's like, well, they're all down in the truck. He's like, yeah, I know where they are. He's like, I want you to get some more. And he's like, well, aren't these enough? He's like, no, I want some more.
That's awesome.
But it's like he brought up all these garbage sacks full of
Right.
beers, and they all got lined up, and they were from all different countries,
over
from
the
all over the
world.
world. It was so awesome. And he
He's
played,
collecting 'em.
so he played, the guitar that I built that we brought from the plate, loved it. And we got together with his brother Donald. We were going to strike some sort of an agreement to do it. It never happened, unfortunately. But so during the show, we're sitting in the balcony taking pictures. So from behind my shoulder, this guy reaches, grabs the camera. I turn around, he opens it up and rips the film
Oh,
out, right?
man.
And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, there's no pictures. It's not allowed. I was like,
And you were just hanging
I
out
said,
with the
we're Rory's guests. He's like, oh, I didn't know. And he hands the whole pile back to me.
Oh,
Right? And I'm like,
gosh.
oh.
No,
So,
thanks for nothing.
of course, it was dark and we stuffed it under our shirts or whatever to try to preserve it. So only 2 pictures came
Oh,
out
God.
that were left from the whole show. And one of them's of my brother and my friend
Oh, yeah, right.
in the dressing room.
Yeah.
And that's all we could recover from the whole room.
Oh,
you know.
God.
But what a magical evening, because he was such a down-to-earth guy.
Yeah, that's why I said when I
He was
first met Jim about the cover, and I mean, what an amazing musician he was, and so underrated.
Yeah.
I mean, you never heard, like, it's not like they talked about him on the radio or
No,
anything
but
all the
that was
time.
of his own doing too. He didn't want to be a
No,
famous.
That's a
he
good
wasn't
point.
a limelight
He
guy.
didn't want that. He
Yeah,
didn't
that's a
want
very good
the smash hits. He didn't want to be a
Right.
one-hit wonder. He didn't want any part of that
To
stuff.
me, as a fan, it's like, you want that because it's like discovering this unfound treasure or
You're
something
right.
nobody's ever heard.
You're right, but at the same time, it was so cool to be like the guy who knew who Rory Gallagher was. Nobody else
Yeah,
did.
right. Yeah. Oh, you don't know Rory?
Yeah.
Well, like that, he opened for Rush.
Yes,
Oh,
that's
right.
right.
No.
Yeah.
It was like 87.
It was 80. I think 81, the Permanent Waves tour or something like that.
And you
Yeah.
know what happened? See, this picture here was taken at Beginnings in Schaumburg. The opening act was Rush.
Nice.
So they reversed it
Commandeered me.
in the 80s. They remained friends.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
That's
And just to tell you really quick, so when I photographed, Rush was just starting out. And I remember this like it was yesterday. And I was there to photograph Rory. And this band comes out. And this guy comes out with this weird-ass voice. These guys suck. Oh, my God. This is terrible.
Is that funny?
A year or 2 later go by, and we're on the radio, listening to radio, and God, this band is great. Who is this? Didn't they open for Rory a couple years ago? So if I had my camera, and this is prior to Neil Peart.
Oh, John Rutsey.
John
Yeah, the
Rusty,
original drummer.
yeah.
So, I mean, I would have some really rare photos, but I was
Yeah.
saving my 2 rolls of film for Rory Gallagher.
76, that's when that was.
74 is when this
John
picture was
He
taken.
was,
Yeah.
I believe he was only on the first album.
Yeah, John Rutsey was only on the first record.
Yeah.
Working Man and that
Played
stuff.
two gigs in the state with Brett Seed, then he left,
Yeah.
and Peart came in right before their first big tour.
Right.
And they opened for Uriah Heep in Pittsburgh.
Nice.
Yeah. So I
That's
kind of missed
far
that
out.
one.
Yeah, whoops.
Dope!
Yeah, but you were there for this.
I was there for
yeah,
Rory.
right.
I brought my copy today.
Yeah.
Everybody, get one of these. It's so awesome. These guys have done an incredible job
Oh,
to
God,
produce
yeah.
this book, and incredible photography, and just it's great stuff. Get your copy.
Well, thank you,
Thank
Pete.
you.
And see,
Thank you, Uncle Pete.
see Pete and his brother and their bands in Dinosaur Exhibit perform. It's music that we need more of. We need more of that prog R&B
Yes,
kind of thing,
becoming
soulful
a lost.
rock.
It's becoming a lost art.
Well, and
Yeah.
plus there are a bunch of groups from the 60s and 70s, the Mods, right?
Yes.
The
Yeah,
Flak,
and
Yeah.
Aura.
The mods, the
Um,
black.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm sure
drummed for the mods for one summer with Jimmy Rogers and worked with Jimmy Rogers. What a sweetheart of a guy.
Nice.
So we miss you, Jimmy. And when the Aura thing, it was actually going to be an Aura reunion, and then L Latham, the lead vocalist for Aura, he passed away. So then they looked at bringing in another vocalist. That's when Ben came along,
Yeah.
and then that's when it turned into the Dinosaur thing.
Oh,
So
okay.
it became the culmination of, as you said, the Mods and the Flock and
That's
Aura.
very
so
cool.
it's incredible to be part of that. So
Well,
I'm honored.
we saw you.
Crimson,
I forgot who you opened for at the
Wishbone Ash.
Wishbone, and Wishbone. I'm actually friends with Andy Powell, so I saw that you guys were coming. I go, oh, of course I remember the Mods, and of course the Flock, Jerry Goodman, and you guys came out. And I'm not saying because you're sitting here, you blew me away.
Well, thank you.
And a lot of times, seriously, backup bands I don't take pictures of too often.
Yeah.
And then I knew Jerry Goodman was there because obviously, with Mahavishnu and the Flock, very famous. And so I'm sitting there, I go, okay, I'll do the first song. And then all of a sudden, my finger kept clicking. And you guys blew me away. And when Mark told me you guys were playing out in Evanston, I said, all right, I'm going. But Blue Oyster Cult was playing in
Right.
Arcata, so I had to go
Arcata.
shoot that.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, next time you play,
Well,
and I couldn't go Steely Dan either for some reason.
yeah, these guys opened for Steely Dan,
Start
and
playing
they
dates
were,
where I can go. Huh?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
and
Send me your calendar.
Yeah.
you
right?
know,
Whole night.
Pete can address this. I think it was quite an honor that Steely Dan asked them to open 2 nights Ravinia. I think, Pete, didn't they ask you guys to?
The management, Eric, was in charge of all that, and then I heard after the show that, and you're right, because there's rarely an opening act ever at Ravinia. They just don't do that. But I think because of the time of their set or something, we got asked. I'm not even sure. I'm just guessing.
Nice.
But after the fact, there's talk about maybe doing some more shows in New York or LA or something with them.
Very
so
cool. There
Yeah.
you
I don't
go.
know whether that will materialize or not, but just the fact that they were talking about it
Right? Yeah,
is,
absolutely.
is awesome, you know.
And there's a nice blending of the music, because I wouldn't call what you guys do prog, because it's got a bit of hard rock. It's got a bit of the you were pre-Chicago,
yeah, there's
and
R&B, there's
R&B
fusion.
and fusion, and
It's a
you know,
pretty eclectic
yeah,
mix of stuff.
yeah.
Nice,
And-
nice general mix.
yeah, the mix. It works well with what Steely Dan does.
Well, and the
Right,
again, not because you're here, but the musicianship is what blew me away. Like I said, to be very honest, I remember the Mods, but Jerry Goodman I was very familiar with, and I knew he'd blow me away. But the band as a whole, the tightness, and the way the material was presented it's just extraordinary.
Oh, thank
I
you.
mean,
One of those things
How-
that was meant to be.
Yeah.
Just fell into place.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask Pete, how often do you guys actually practice?
Oh, we practice. I mean, if there's not a show coming up, we don't get together. But if there's a show, like just for this last show, well, we practice straight from after Ravinia to
okay.
when there's show. So it's once a week we get together.
Oh, okay, that's
and
more
we
than I
rehearse.
thought.
So yeah, we try to. We really want to make it tight, and with a horn section, you've got to be
Yes.
on to make that stuff happen. So you can't just wing it. So and we don't, because again. So Jerry Goodman's not a band member. He's a guest star all the time, and he's flown in for every show except for one.
Oh, how cool is that?
He lives out in Portland, doesn't he?
He's out in Oregon, yeah.
Yeah,
So
somewhere.
Nice.
it's just, again, it's an honor and a pleasure. And as you know, Howard Levy sat in with us at Ravinia, and Howard's a marvel, and he's a sweetheart. He's just such a great person, not just an incredible musician, but a great person, great guy to work with. So.
Howard, I don't know, Bell and the Flectones, yeah, that was his band, but the way he plays harmonica is a combination of both, much like a blues-oriented guy, but also he brings in all this jazz and classical type of scales into it, and very few people play harmonica like that.
Nobody does.
Yeah, and the way he was...
He wrote concerto for harmonica. Nobody's done that before. And has played with orchestras, 200-piece orchestras with harmonica.
Have you ever heard that before?
I think Corky Siegel
what's
did that.
incredible is he was up at the Cafe Carp in Fort Atkinson doing a solo show. And I thought, well, this will be interesting. And I went to see him. And I knew Howard from Fling Guitars. He would frequent coming into our shop. But I'd never seen him, so I went to see him when I moved up here like 15, 16 years ago in Fort Atkinson. And he just was just him and his harmonica and the piano, and he was playing excerpts from this this piece he wrote for orchestra. It was mind-boggling. Well, like Bella Fleck, nobody, there'd never been banjo with orchestra before. So that's the level. These guys are of the highest level there is in the world.
That's fantastic.
But they're all great human beings and great people to work with too. So it's awesome. It's very cool. Yeah.
So let's jump back with the book now. Well, I guess it's been a few months now, but you guys were recently inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame library, correct?
Well, I would say inducted.
Well, let's roll.
Tim,
let's roll that back a little.
Okay.
Our book was accepted. They reviewed the book. It was placed into what is called the Museum's Archives and Library Collection, and that library is an appointment-only library, and it's used for education, research, the preservation of rock and roll history.
Okay, nice.
A lot of people who are writing books about music use the library. Professors who want to do research, they cover everything from blues to to what's going on today. They're fluid in terms of staying current. And the two young women who are the more or less managers and directors of this library, they're just wonderful. They do great things at this library.
And Andy Leach, too.
Yeah, excuse me. And Andy Leach, who was the director of the archives, I believe that's who, Jim, who did you originally contact?
It was Andy. And, other than meeting and photographing Dinosaur exhibit, I think the highlight of our book experience has been going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because we were allowed to go. We got a tour of the backstage, if you will. And the first thing that happened is they showed us stuff that's not out for the general public.
Yeah, these are private areas.
Yeah.
These there's a vault, and this contains clothing, accessories, artifacts, etc. It's all climate controlled, and it's all cataloged. And they're either being prepared for exhibit, or they're coming in for musicians and donations. They're being stored, and they're all walking around with white gloves, like it's the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago.
That's awesome.
So, Jim, so we walk into this room, and we're looking around, and go ahead, Jim.
Well, we walk in the room, and the very first thing there is John Lennon's guitar from the rooftop.
The rooftop show.
Abbey Road.
Yeah, and right next to that is his Ed Sullivan guitar. So I offered him $10. They wouldn't take it.
Well, this thing,
I tried.
This guitar, this
Did they ask you to leave?
this Rickenbacker is laying literally
inches
right
here
from our nose, and I keep thinking, don't sneeze.
Yeah.
Don't touch the volume controls.
You didn't bring your white glove.
Yeah,
right?
there's nothing separating us from this. And these guys are all professionals at the Rock and Roll Hall. And Jim and I are, I'm 69, Jim's 66, and we're like, and these guys are walking around like it's nothing. And actually what they told us was, they're all there to do a job, just like anyone else is. They're professionals, but every once in a while they stand back, and their mouth kind of drops, and they
Take
go,
it in,
"Wow."
yeah.
Well,
We also.
well,
Go ahead.
I'm just so excited about
All right.
the Beatles suits without
Yeah,
the collars.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, everything from Cyndi Lauper's shoes to Tina Turner's
Jimi
dresses.
Hendrix's Woodstock guitar strap.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, the Jimi Hendrix story that was really cool was they showed us it was under plastic, and it was the original lyrics for Purple Haze. And apparently, while he was writing, he got pissed off. He go, "I'm not getting." He crumpled it all up and threw it away. Then he realized later, oh, maybe it wasn't too bad. He uncrumpled it,
Oh, for real.
and that's what they had. And it was all on this yellow
Yeah,
tablet.
this is a separate. This is the archives where they keep, more documents and things like that. And she pulls out this piece of paper that Jimi Hendrix wrote, and the original title of Purple Haze was "Purple Haze, Jesus Saves," and the lyrics weren't, the final lyrics. And she goes, "Would you like to hold these?" And I'm going,
God, yes.
"Would I like to hold these?" And it's like, she says, "Here." And they were so nice. And then we're walking around, and here on a shelf is a metal box, maybe like a bread box, and it's inscribed with something from Yoko Ono, not to be opened until 2040.
The 100-year
100-year anniversary of John Lennon's death.
birth.
So this thing is just sitting there, being preserved. It's a what do you call it when in buildings when they put mementos?
Time
in
capsule.
there? Time capsule.
yeah.
Thank you. And it's just sitting there, and
Nobody
God
knows
knows
what's
what's
in
in there.
She
Hopefully
just
nothing
gave him the
elect.
box and didn't tell
It's all
nobody.
sealed. No,
That is
and
wild.
she entrusted it. Who do you give this to? Because they don't want anyone to make any money off of it.
Right,
and,
right.
But it was just such a highlight.
It
though.
was-
Were you guys
That's
there recently?
amazing.
This was
April?
in late
Oh, yeah.
April.
Yeah.
I mean, we're wearing these VIP badges, and everybody's being so nice to us, and I'm going, "Hey, we're not rock and roll stars.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah,
wrote a
why
book.
not?
We just wrote a
You're
book."
rock and roll stars
Yeah,
now. Let
that's
me tell you.
But yeah, there was a highlight. It really was.
That's awesome. Well, I
That's
know they
amazing.
rotate the inventory over there because when I
Yes.
was there, they had Hendrix's 12-string acoustic
Exactly.
there, and I don't know if that was on display. But
They
I
do.
don't recall.
They rotate, and they just don't have enough room.
yeah,
It's just like any other museum.
I'm sure they're
So-
overwhelmed with memorabilia and stuff like that, clothing, like you said, whatever.
One funny story, and we also met the gentleman who is ahead of all the things that come in and get donated. And I said, "How do these things come in? Like, do they come in an envelope or a box?" And he said, "Well, when Yoko Ono sends us some things, she takes great care in folding and packing and protecting. And then sometimes we get things that just come in like Priority Express in the post office, something very important. So it depends on who's donating
Right.
what, but the stuff comes in different ways, and they're just glad to get it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, otherwise what? It just falls by the wayside,
Exactly,
or somebody
exactly.
unfortunately passes away and it just gets lost.
They're waiting for your
Nobody takes any
drumsticks, by the
time.
way.
yeah, are they? Yeah. Well, somebody at Ravinia has those.
Yeah.
No, the next night I went to play, the second show. My sticks were gone off in my kit. I left them on the kit.
Oh,
They were
jeez.
gone.
Check
See?
eBay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Maybe they're for sale on
Check
eBay.
eBay, yeah.
You know what? I didn't think about that.
You never know nowadays. You blow
Craigslist,
your
yeah.
nose in a napkin. Okay,
Yeah.
this John Lennon blew his nose on
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
You know
Oh,
what I mean?
everything. Yeah, you get all of that.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you too. With the name of the book is Yesterday and Today. Did you guys kind of have that in your head when you put it together, of going from when you got started to what the photos of musicians nowadays are?
Well, just give you a very brief history. Mark and I did a mock-up of the book through Walgreens, and it was 12 by 12,
Cheap.
like
Yeah,
a record album,
cheap.
and it was called Classic Rock Photographs Then and Now. But apparently, there's a series of books out there called Then and Now.
Oh, right.
So our publisher, and we got turned down about by 30
Took
times.
us about a year to find a publisher. We had an offer from a publisher in England, and and then our publisher Amherst Media in Buffalo, New York, made us an offer. But our original concept was a 12 by 12 book, 225 pages, with a lot more writing and a lot more of Jim's photos enlarged. And you take it from there.
But, you know, once they're footing the bill, they said, okay, we want 7 by 10 bullet points instead of stories. So, you know, they told me that, so I had to go to Mark and say, you know,
deliver the bad news.
you know the,
Yeah,
the
right.
2,000 words you wrote on
You
each
know the
hand?
4
Yeah.
you know the 4 years that your wife sat around
Well,
waiting.
now you guys can come out with the big 12 by 12 limited edition.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why we're published now.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Big
But-
time.
But
So that's how we got the title.
that's how we
Okay.
got. And just so
Yeah,
Jim, you know,
right.
the yesterday part, you know, Jim, you know, his original portfolio was all based in the 70s, and
Sure.
Jim, what, through the early 80s?
No, 73 to 78.
78, okay, before you went into corporate photography.
And make
And made, yeah, and
Sell
earned a
out.
living.
Sell out.
Artist thing.
Yeah.
Again, right?
And
Screw that.
when we were
Money.
thinking of the book, Jim restarted, Jim, along with his freelance business, he started taking photographs again. And we thought, boy, wouldn't it be cool to have this contrast between artists in their prime, looking good, all that hair, and then those that are still performing. If I can get some of those guys, just the comparison,
Right.
the
No,
visual
absolutely.
contrast, and then also get some other acts that I was never able to capture from that era that are still performing.
Sure.
And it made for a really good selling point to publishers, and made for something a little more interesting, just having, because there were a lot of photographers famous photographers from the 70s, but very few photographers have the longevity and span the kind of decades that Jim's
Right. to
portfolio
go
does.
Then and now.
Right.
And just a quick story how I got back into it. It was 2008, and I hadn't shot a concert in God knows how long. And I got a call from Paul Nelson, who was Johnny Winter's manager.
Wow.
And he said, I saw one of your pictures, because I had a website up, and we're coming out with these bootleg CD series of Johnny Winter, and I like to use one for the cover.
Awesome.
I said, okay. So I said, well, next time you're in town, I'll come and I'll shoot Johnny Winter live. And I think I brought you with me, didn't I?
You did.
Yeah. And so we went and met Paul and photographed Johnny Winter. And the cool news is I met a writer named Lisa Torrum, who writes for a United Kingdom magazine. And she said, I do all Chicago concerts. I could always use a photographer. And that's how I started getting
Nice.
photographs again. And again, it's like, you got to be a little ballsy. And I
Can you
put
say
myself.
that?
Yeah.
Can we say that?
This is cable.
Is this thing on?
Beyond cable.
Yeah.
Yeah. okay.
So, and that's how it started. So I started doing a lot of shows with her. And it's just cool how it all keeps getting bigger. So
Right. Right.
we did one show at Fitzgerald's with Savoy Brown, Kim Simmons. And I brought some pictures I took of him in the 70s. He was so amazed that he and I have become friends, and every time he comes here, we hang out, and I
That's
bring Mark
very
quite
cool.
often.
Another great guy, by the way.
He
Yeah.
is a great guy.
And it just kept escalating. And then, as I
Right.
told earlier, then I started asking Ron Onesti at the Arcada if I could come there, and he said sure. And that's how it's
I
happened.
wanted to. You brought up Paul Nelson. I wanted to say one thing about Paul Nelson, and Jim made the original connection. But in his later years, Johnny Winter was not a well man. He had legitimate health problems.
Yeah.
He also had drug problems. He wasn't taking the right medication. People were not. His managers were not really helping him. And Paul Nelson recognized what a legend Johnny was when he was alive, still is.
Yeah.
And he really helped get Johnny straight in terms of his health, getting him the proper medical care, and really got his career going and got him the respect as a human being that he
Right,
deserved
right.
later in his
Instead of
career.
just fading
Isn't that
away.
right?
Absolutely correct. Yeah.
And very nice man, and that's a story I always like to tell, and I actually put it in the book.
That's amazing.
Where did you guys see Johnny?
Oh boy, I saw him at it was called Clearwater in Dundee the first time. Then he played Dirty Nellies,
I saw him at
Then
beginnings
Country
in
Club
his
Hills.
prime.
I think I put it like 4 or 5 times before he passed away.
You know, funny story. When I saw him at beginnings, which was a big club in, was it Schaumburg, Jim?
Schaumburg, yeah.
Schaumburg,
Yeah.
okay. And this was after the Johnny Winter and album. You know, a lot of rock and roll
So way
stuff.
back.
And he had his band. He had a 3-piece, and he wanted to do some acoustic blues stuff. And people in the audience were not happy. They were booing and.
Oh, for real?
And it was, you know, they wanted to hear rock and roll hoochie coo and, you know, the stuff from the hard rock. And he, you know, I don't know the man, but he was furious. He said, look, he said, I'm playing the blues. I'm going to play the blues. If it wasn't for these guys, there'd be no rock and roll.
Nice.
And he was mad. And
for
he gave the audience some of the songs they wanted, but he also did, you know, some Willie Dixon and
Sure.
Man, he
Howlin'
was
Wolf and
such a
so forth.
purist.
Yeah.
You know,
He was.
And he was a messenger for the blues, and that's
Oh,
you
God,
know,
yeah.
He was a measure, and he was phenomenal acoustic guitar player.
he was.
12-string, 6-string. This man would
Guitar
know.
player.
Yeah, Dobro,
Dobro,
you know,
Dobro,
Resonator.
National Steel.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Yeah.
And he just wanted to pay tribute to these people he loved. And, you know, he and Muddy Waters put out the Hard Again album. And
Yeah, he
it-
resurrected
yeah.
Muddy's career.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's just a story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
great.
saw him in Milwaukee. God, it must have been, I want to say, early 90s maybe.
Yeah.
And his health wasn't in such, he wasn't doing well then. And I think we just talked about this the other day too. Two guys like walked him out on stage.
Yes.
And sat him down in a chair. And I mean,
Yeah.
he was really moving slow, and you
Yeah.
could tell he just didn't look well.
Yeah. That
But
was
I tell you what, when that man picked up that guitar, it was game on.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter his health, how he looked, nothing.
Yeah.
Because it just flowed through him out of that guitar, and I was
Yeah.
blown away.
Well, that's the one thing Johnny did have even at the end is he still had this. His mind was there, and boy, he could recall anything. You know, he would just tell us. You could ask him anything. You know, from '72, whatever. He'd go right there. He was so
Right.
sharp up there. He remembered every event,
Sweet.
every gig, every person. It was incredible. He
Isn't that
was-
wild?
Yeah,
Saw him
yeah,
at Alpine.
just incredible.
I saw him at Alpine.
Oh, the Alpine
Nice.
Valley? Yeah.
Very cool.
Opened for George Thorogood.
Oh,
Really?
far
Yeah,
out.
I went to see Johnny Winter. I didn't care about George Thorogood.
Right. Ooh, can you say that on there?
Well, we're not gonna have that discussion.
Yeah, because George is here next
Yeah,
week.
right. He is. He's going to be in Milwaukee, I thought. Just kidding, George. So, would you guys like to jump into some of the pictures now while
Yeah.
we're on that? And
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let's
I'm
look
sure
at some of the
everybody
pictures.
would love
Since
to
we're
hear
here.
some of the stories behind the pictures.
Absolutely. That's good. Go for it, Jim.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Since you're here.
Yeah, while you're here.
I've seen these so many times I think I'll take a nap.
Yeah, come on.
No, you can't ever. You can't. Hey, you can't ever
You're
be
the
jaded by this.
storyteller.
All
you
right,
can't be
that's
napping.
right. No, these are wonderful. My wife thinks, you know, she has Jim on a pedestal. I like kind of.
It's hard to get down at my age too, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
My knees hurt when I jump.
Backwards.
Yeah, back.
Right?
Well, I kind of talked about this one before. This is Rory Gallagher. It was taken at beginnings, and this is the Rush story. But the reason I chose this for the cover, it just to me epitomized rock and roll. He's doing the what do you call it again? What Chuck Berry did, the duck walk. The duck walk, which he would do as well. And he's playing that old Strat that was just beat to hell. But the man, to me, is in the top 3. He's in the team picture of my favorite guitarist of all
Oh,
time.
God,
Absolutely.
I could YouTube him all day. It's just so much fun. And I know, and Beck's my favorite, but and Stevie Ray's probably next, and then probably Rory. But they're all good. It's just who do you like? And Clapton's great, and Page and
Just
Kim
different
Simmons.
styles,
Yeah.
yeah.
But Rory, just the excitement that he would do, and the stage show, and his pure love of the blues.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I mean, he could rock with anybody.
Such an original, right?
Yeah.
It's so funny that sometimes, like, I got a small blues section, and I mean, Rory albums don't come around very often. The
Right.
people that have them know, so they don't let them go, or they go for big money.
Yeah.
And so when I do get them in here, it's just sometimes the people's reaction, like flipping through the blues section. Who's this guy, Rory? Is he blues? Like, just put it back then, because you don't know.
Well, you could ask. You could ask even Hendrix
and
and Clapton back in the day who
Exactly.
their favorite
Oh,
guitarists
God,
yeah.
was, right?
The
And
Hendrix story. Somebody asked Jimi Hendrix, who's the best guitarist.
Exactly.
he says, "I don't know. Ask Rory
Yeah, that's
Gallagher."
Rory Gallagher.
Yeah, right. Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got an album. It was a double album called Irish Tour
Yes.
'74, I think. 75, I'm not sure.
74.
You might as well just get that album.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, that pretty
That's
much
right. It's
covers
a staple.
Yeah, that's a staple.
All right,
Yeah.
not to even to leave out his first band, Taste.
Taste was
Right.
good
was an
too.
amazing band.
I have that album.
And now, yeah, I have them both.
Oh, okay. It's
One
so
up on
bad.
ya.
Yeah, it's so bad because I was going to offer it to you for about $20.
Yeah,
I
right.
have it.
Oh, I tell you what, those albums came through. This was quite a while back in a collection that I bought, and I saw them in there. And the first thought that went into my head was, "Those are going in my collection.
There you go.
I don't care the condition, what they're.
Yeah.
I've got to have those albums."
So there you
Because
go,
just
everybody.
don't see
Tim's
them.
got a private vault somewhere.
Yeah, right.
It's,
got a vault too.
it's the archives. Yeah, he wears gloves back there.
Yeah, right.
The white gloves, yeah.
Temperature controlled,
You
everything.
can't go back there without putting a mask on, gloves.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, we know.
All right, what do we got next?
This guy's kind of famous. That's Paul McCartney. The Wings tour of, I believe, was '76. Just an awesome show. And I always say this, probably the two loudest ovations I've ever heard in my life for someone coming out. First was Elvis, and second would probably be Wings and McCartney. Because this was, he didn't tour
Right.
since the Beatles on this tour. And it was an awesome show.
Was that in Chicago?
Stadium,
Yeah.
Chicago Stadium. Yeah.
Mom, if you're listening, my mom, I remember she was at that show.
Oh, really?
And I think it was after the show that one of the people that had come with them, they had separated. So they're out in the parking lot walking around looking for their friend. This limo pulls up down the way, and the window comes down the back, and somebody yelled out, "Hey, you guys all right? You need a ride or something?" And they're like, "Oh, no, we're looking for a friend." And it was Paul McCartney. He stuck his head out. "All right, have a good night." I'm like, "Are you insane?" Like, I would have just jumped in the car. "Yeah, I'm going wherever you are." Forget my friends, forget my car.
Right.
Or I'm on tour now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right though, God. When Wings came out, that was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Because I think the first 2-3 albums maybe they didn't tour, and it wasn't even Wings. It was just Paul and Linda,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was actually Paul
And Denny
McCartney
Lane.
and Wings, Denny Lane. Yeah, well, we want to watch. They were having a rough time at the beginning because of the transition from the Beatles, and
Oh, of course. Yeah.
you know, it just
people were upset.
yeah, they were upset, and they were doing more pop, and
Well, and I remember, I don't remember the set list, but I know they did almost all Wings stuff. They didn't do a lot of Beatles stuff, whereas now when McCartney tours, it's probably half and half, if not
Oh,
more
yeah,
Beatles
sure.
stuff. But he did a lot of Wing stuff because I think he was trying to separate.
Get away from it.
Yeah.
Linda caught a lot of flack, and on keyboards and things like
yeah.
that.
Well,
And-
her keyboards were better than Yoko's singing.
Well, that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
I play
God.
keyboards, and I thought she was okay, but she did the job that she was there to do.
Right. But
And-
you're right. She did get a lot of slack. The only reason
It was-
she's on here is because
well,
they're married. And,
The Joe English, a drummer, there's a quote in the book, and he said, everybody expects her to be Rick Wakeman, and that's not
Yeah,
who she is.
right.
And,
she was a photographer.
right.
Yeah.
And, only, pardon?
For you kids out there, you want to explain who Rick Wakeman is?
Yeah.
He just played the Arcada.
Yeah, you just shot with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just him and a solo piano.
Yeah,
Rick
awesome
Wakeman. No
show.
bangs of keyboards.
Wow.
Him and a grand. But let's get back to the pictures.
All right.
Sidetrack.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Paul
That's
McCartney.
all right.
Elvis, as I said, one of the loudest ovations, and this was, the second to last performance he did or tour before he passed. But just an exceptional show.
This was at the stadium too.
This was also at the stadium. 70.
My brother went
Six,
to
maybe?
this show.
Mike?
Mike went to that show. He asked me to go. I was like, I don't want to see Elvis. I wanted to see.
Which-
I wanted to see Hendrix, but of course
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I was
Well,
there.
the question is that good Elvis or the bad Elvis or the in-between Elvis?
Yeah, there's like 3 versions.
Yeah, which version of Elvis was that?
Well, I think as you said, if you were at that show, that was the version, right?
That was
the great version.
I thought it was great. I remember him putting lyrics on a music stand. He did, if I'm not mistaken, he did "My Way," and he didn't know the words, and he had to put it on a music stand. Not that that's the end of the world, but it was frickin' Elvis.
Yeah,
You know,
Hey, who cares?
I don't care.
Who's
I mean,
frickin' Elvis?
if it wasn't for him, you know, because you got to remember back then, in the 50s, even though Chuck Berry was out there and a little richer, white folks weren't seeing this,
No.
and
Well, his
He-
first hit was
that's all right,
Billy,
Mama.
yeah,
All Right, Mama.
Big Crudup,
Big Mama
Big
Thornton.
Mama Thornton.
Yeah,
Big Mama Thornton. Yeah,
but you know,
Hound
he
Dog,
brought
too.
that sound of the South.
he did.
That you know Chuck Berry and Little Richard couldn't get out there. I even heard a interview with Little Richard. They asked him, "Does it offend you that Pat Boone is doing your songs and
Yeah.
making?" He said, "No, as long as my music's getting out there."
Right,
What a cool thing to
exactly.
say. But you got to remember, Little Richard, they wouldn't play him.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Pat Boone comes out with Tutti Frutti,
Yeah,
And it's a huge
and it's a
hit.
huge
Yeah.
hit. And then all of a sudden, people started learning about those
Go
guys.
backwards.
It's like the blues guys.
Well, again,
Well, you
again,
got
when you
two-
talk about the British invasion and Rory and the Stones and the Beatles and Zeppelin, it's Elvis and Chuck Berry. you
Yes.
know?
Right.
None of that would exist without
Yes.
Elvis.
Yeah, like
Yes.
Jim was
Very
saying too. I mean, you got to remember way back then, a lot of the blues singers and black artists were only getting certain places to play.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know what
yeah.
I mean, it was all confined, and you go over there where nobody's going to see you, and then this white guy's going to make your music famous over on this side.
No, you're
of town.
right. You're right. There's the
But I mean, at the time, yeah, it was an awful thing. But it was, like you said, how it crossed over. Like, maybe you hear Elvis do an old blues tune. Wow, I wonder who did that originally. Then you go back, and, wow, this guy's really good, and start listening.
I think that's what that's what I did. You know, I would say that, you know, I've heard of B.B. King, but I didn't know a lot about Willie Dixon
Sure.
and all those guys. And all of a sudden you start seeing who wrote this song.
Yeah.
Like Little Red Rooster, the Stones did. You read that and
Right.
go, oh my God, I'm going to go back. So I have a huge blues collection, but it's based on what I saw Zeppelin
Earlier,
and all those
yeah,
guys
right,
do
exactly.
and whose music they were doing. And then all of a sudden you go, boy, these other guys' versions kind of cool.
All right.
Yeah.
You know?
You're right.
You know, that's the thing too. It kind of drives me nuts because a lot of people be like the Zeppelin and the Stone. Basically, any band that came out of England
Oh.
that covered blues
Well,
tunes
the
were a
Art-
bunch of rip-offs. And
the Yardbirds and Clapton was probably the biggest proponent of the blues.
right, but that's
But
all.
they
the
all
only
said it.
music
I mean,
they
Yeah.
got.
Robert Plant, he always, Elvis,
Yeah.
Elvis.
But that's
Elvis,
all the
yeah.
music they got in England
You're right.
was our blues
Yeah.
and Elvis and.
But what's so iconic about this picture is aren't all the Elvis impersonators
This
Yeah.
is it.
look like that?
You're
Yeah,
right.
right.
So
It's-
I've
this is
actually-
the model right here.
This
You're
is
right
your-
about
that's
that.
right.
I had a
This is
person
sort of the
look at
model.
my book. I forgot where one of our book signings goes. Is this the real Elvis? Oh, yeah.
No, it's the Chinese Elvis.
No, she was thinking it might be an
you said,
impersonator.
there's 5,000 impersonators. That's what
I
they
will
look
bet
like.
you that
That's
there
right.
are Chinese Elvises.
Oh, there is.
There's Elvis.
Yeah.
My other favorite question. I'm sorry, just to go back to that. A person asked me, "Did you go to all these concerts?" I said, well, "Yeah." How do you think I got the pictures?
He stole them.
Oh,
like
didn't you get
everyone
them off the
else.
internet?
Oh yeah.
See, that's how people think nowadays,
Yeah.
though. Oh,
Yeah.
you just got that off the internet? No, I actually took the picture.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
My iPhone at the Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome.
Moving on.
All right, this is the picture that's at the Smithsonian book. So obviously that's the Stones, and I think that was a '76 tour. This has been published quite a bit. So obviously with Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards. and Jagger doing whatever he's doing down there by Keith Richards
He's
zipper.
doing-
I'm not sure.
He's being Jagger.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just, and just the coloring and all that is.
That is a sweet picture.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really dig that.
Incredible.
I mean, and it too, it's like, not that it defines them, but that picture just shows who they were. I mean,
and the key to any photograph, whether it's rock and roll or corporate or whatever, it's the decisive moment.
It is. It's capturing the moment.
Yeah,
Right,
and that's what I try to
exactly.
do. I want the viewer to look at one of my photos and feel like they were at the show. And I try to
absolutely.
capture a particular moment. I don't want it to be just a bland picture. I mean, anyone could take a picture of a guy just strumming a guitar, but I wait for that facial expression, head back, or whatever.
Right.
The picture I got of Jerry, that's on my website,
Yeah.
jimsummariaphoto.com.
Shameless plug.
Jerry almost looks like he's in pain playing guitar.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
the violin. But it's just, to me, he's just into it.
Sure.
And that's what I love about the musicians. I love when they close their eyes and their head goes back
they're
and they
just-
just play. It's like if you ever watch a Stevie Ray Vaughan
Dwayne Allman.
play, the head is just
Yeah.
back, and they're just playing.
Just
They
lost
get
in the music.
locked into
Lost
that
in-
moment. That's
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah.
That's when you can really, like, if you're in the audience or whatever, and you're watching a guitar player like that, it's like you're locked in. You feel one with what this guy's
Yeah.
pouring out into that guitar. You know what I mean?
Well,
Right.
it's great. Like this again, this image. It's like you are capturing that split second in time that can never be duplicated. Again,
Right.
And that's what makes it so special.
Thank you. Here's $5. Thank you.
Yeah. That's why we brought him in.
Obviously, this is The Who, and I would say of all the bands I've seen, probably over 500, 600 concerts. I don't know. I never kept track. The Who is the most exciting live act I've ever seen. And Keith Moon, to me, is the most incredible
Explosive.
musician I've ever seen in my life. And obviously Townsend with what he does. And even though Entwistle just stands there, if you ever hear him play bass,
Incredible.
that's the cool thing about, they don't have a lead guitar player. They have a rhythm guitar player. They have a lead bass player.
Right.
And what he plays is like lead. And Daltrey's voice back in those days was just beyond awesome. So just as The Who to me was a total package, and especially the era when they did Tommy, Who's Next, and Quadrophenia.
God, yeah.
It's hard to see such extremely different albums done so well. I mean, Townsend is just an absolute genius.
Right. Concept rock album. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody was doing that kind of stuff. Like an opera that's rock and roll music. They
Yeah.
thought he was out of his
Well
mind.
before anybody.
Oh God, yeah.
You know, and Who's
Like
Next
when
might.
they started with Tommy, I remember people thought, "What are you nuts?
Well, I
Can't
remember.
do this."
I remember my first listen. I didn't get it.
I didn't either.
You know, I thought.
first
And
Well,
you
it's hard to
listen,
go from
listen.
Magic Bus to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this is kind of weird.
I can see from miles. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, Who's Next? Like the perfect album.
Oh yeah.
Probably the top 10
Yeah,
of all
it's
time.
like you say too. That when I first heard it was like, wow, I'm not sure about it. But now going back, Tommy and Quadrophenia are probably my two favorite Who albums. I just love them albums.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
The great band.
So where was this taken?
This was also at Chicago Stadium.
Awesome. And you were there actually.
Yeah, I was
Are
there.
you sure?
I think so.
Can you verify this?
I didn't know you back then, so I can't
No,
vouch for you.
but I was there. I have a
Awesome.
memory of it.
Ah,
Robert Plant as Zeppelin. This was '77 tour.
sweet.
Another phenomenal live band. That's really all I could say. Stage show lighting. You know, the way it started out, not this show, but in '73, the first time I saw them, and that's the one where I snuck on the floor at St. Louis, drove all the way to St. Louis and snuck on the floor. So if you can imagine it, from what my recollection is,
It's a little
was
foggy.
pitch black stage, and then the beginning of rock and roll, which, as a drummer, you know that he stole that from Keep a Knockin' by Little Richard, the very beginning of it.
I still can't play that.
Yeah, it's the very same. It's the very same thing. Anyway, and all you see is like a white light on bottom here, dun 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 dun, dun, and then boom, all the lights come on, and Jimmy Page comes out, does that weird little dance he used to do,
Right.
and goes into the chords of rock and roll, and I was like, blown away. And
Yeah.
see, a lot of those concerts were spectacles too. The outfits. I mean, think of the
Sure.
outfits that Jagger, Rod Stewart, all those guys wore too.
Oh, he was definitely a show.
And at this particular show, I don't know if I put in a page, but the one picture I've sold a lot of is he's got that Nazi uniform on.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Because it was the only time he wore it because he got so
Yeah.
much crap for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah. And so it's in a Led Zeppelin book because the guy who wrote the book said this is the only picture I could find of him wearing that outfit.
Yeah.
So
Isn't
but anyway,
that crazy?
so that's Plant then, and then I think the next picture is Plant now.
Awesome.
I shot him at the Vic, and I was shooting him singing and singing and singing and singing, and then it was all over, and everyone's applauding him, and he's applauding back, and the way the backlight is on his hair, and he looked right at me, obviously, and he's applauding, as you could see, and it's like, this is the picture I want to put in the book.
Nice.
Incredible.
And it's just a great portrait of him, and it was just so cool. The audience, and it was a very laid back audience. And he just did all slow stuff. He did it. It was a show with Emmylou Harris, the Milk Carton Kids, and a couple other people. I can't remember who else. And so he only did 5 songs because every person did 5 songs, and every time he did a Zeppelin song, the place went bananas. But he did it acoustically.
Nice.
And he did. Was it Battle of Evermore? I think. And people just went bananas.
Right.
But great show. Great
Yeah,
talent.
that's what, at
Cool
first
guy,
I
too.
remember when he started, getting going on his solo, and people were pissed off because they wanted to hear Zeppelin, and he's like, "That's not what I'm doing. This is my solo stuff.
Yeah, but you see,
Not
he's
here to do
changed.
Zeppelin."
He's
but now,
changed it
yeah,
and done it differently. And he's admitted he can't. I said I can't hit those notes anymore. So he's changed his approach.
do them
And,
softer.
and what I like about him is he keeps moving forward. And a lot of bands rely on what they did in the past, which is cool.
Yeah, he
'cause that's
doesn't
what
rest
people
on
want.
his laurels.
But he doesn't
No.
rest.
No.
And he keeps investigating. He keeps
He's
investigating.
always doing something different.
Yeah.
That's what
He's
I
got
love
totally
about
into
it.
the African music.
True
like-
artist.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you with any artist, really, like you say, they move on. You still want the classic. You can go back. They don't have to keep repeating themselves. Let them explore and bring us new music.
Right.
You know what I mean? Can always go back.
And he deserves to do that anyway.
Yeah.
You
He's
know.
what he wants.
Robert frickin' Plant
That's right.
can do whatever he wants.
That's right.
Can you say that? We're frickin'?
Frickin' Plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Ann Wilson of Heart in 77 or 78. The best.
Yeah.
Great shot.
Yeah, thank you. Along with
Great
Grace
shot.
Slick, probably my 2 favorite female singers. Grace Slick probably being number 1, but Ann Wilson puts on a great show and
Amazing
great
voice.
voice. And I'm sure everyone's seen Stairway to Heaven that she did at the Kennedy
Oh,
Center.
yeah.
And if
Made
you didn't
Robert
cry
Plant
watching
cry.
that
Yeah.
with Jason Bonham on drums, something's wrong with you.
I'll
They,
tell you, just a quick
I'm just looking down. They got for that Kennedy Center honors for that. They got 5 million YouTube hits the first week.
Oh, I believe
It was just the computers were just blowing up from that.
Yeah, that was amazing.
And
That's right.
there was Jason Bonham on
Right.
drums.
Yeah.
Didn't I say that?
Yes.
Oh,
I did, okay.
see?
I saw
I'm getting
them.
old. I can't remember these
Hey,
things.
what? Huh?
Yeah. I saw them a few years back, Hart and Jason Bonham's band at Ravinia. And at the end, they came out together, probably did like 6 Zeppelin songs, of course, Bonham on drums. But they ended with Stairway to Heaven. And I'm telling you, it was like a spiritual experience, man. Because he was all in white. Bonham, had his dad's derby on, and all the backdrop behind was like stained glass church windows, and they had these white lights shining on them. And they started going, but not even about halfway through the song, and they brought out the Chicago Gospel Choir.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, goosebumps just lined. I was like, oh my God.
Moving
Because he
stuff.
was just glowing. What I got at was like it was supposed to just represent the spirit of his father playing drums.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it was amazing. I've never seen anything like that before. And nobody can belt that out like Ann could.
Yeah, awesome
Her
performance.
voice was just
Awesome.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I just saw a concert recently on Access TV on cable, and I think it was from last year. She still sounds
Yeah, she
great.
Oh
does.
God,
Yeah.
yeah.
She's
yeah.
still wonderful. They've dropped the key a little bit, which most bands do as they get older. But
Sure.
she impressed me so much, and she was so animated and so into the music, and that's what I like. And her sister too, Nancy. I mean, the two of them are so true to the music, and they still have that spirit and that devotion, and it comes across on stage. And
Oh yeah.
when I go see a concert, that's what I want to see. I want to see the musicians really into what they're doing, and the interplay.
Sure.
Yeah.
She put out a solo album last year, Immortal. It's a double album. It's all covers. You bought it here.
Yeah.
Black Circle Records.
Yeah.
But she does a cover of Tom Petty's Luna. That's just phenomenal.
It was all like her tribute to fallen musicians
Really?
that had passed recently.
Yeah, and I give her credit because, in the 70s, a little bit after the 70s, she started gaining some weight. And people were giving her all sorts of crap.
Oh, yeah.
And because
And-
she was a female, and I find that repulsive
You know-
because, if a guy got heavy, so what? All right, you just do it. But
Didn't
because
seem
she
to-
got heavy, she got a lot of crap for
Oh
that.
yeah.
And it was the advent of MTV
Yeah, yeah.
when they were,
And they didn't want to put her
pushing.
on.
They didn't. They kept pushing Nancy out into the foreground, and focusing on her. And they faced a lot of sexism coming up as a rock and roll band, and they used to. There's a quote here that I just wanted to read. I remember I read this, and Nancy had told us that she had overheard somebody say that Nancy's a fine-looking girl, but is that guitar really plugged in? That was, and that's the kind of thing
But
that they
that's what
face.
they went through, yeah.
Yeah, and if you read any of their interviews, if you read the books about them, this is a big part of their the challenges they faced.
Sure.
It eventually stopped, but it was rough for them.
There were labels wouldn't sign them either in the beginning because of these silly girls. This is a man's business.
Exactly,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
They thought they wouldn't take them serious.
When you're going to get a female in your band.
Yeah.
We're not opposed to
But
it.
yeah, you're right. I mean, if anybody scrutiny over the year, they took more than their
They-
share.
they-
That
they
in the
did.
beginning, then with her gaining weight and getting knocked for that.
This.
But nobody the whole time was opening their ears and going, God, listen to her voice. She still sounds amazing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
they showed everybody, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, that's-
They did.
had a big
God,
comeback.
Yeah, 'cause
That's-
like I said, that show, when I haven't really heard nothing from them in a long time. And as soon as she grabbed that microphone, I was blown away. Like,
Well,
oh my God, she sounds like it's the
But again,
70s.
when they hit their stride, when they hit the scene, with their, in the 70s, and again from nowhere to somewhere, right?
Right.
It just blew everybody,
Oh, yeah.
and it just shut everybody.
I was gonna say they shut their mouths.
They did.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to say nothing.
No, we have 2 female vocalists in my Tom Petty cover band, so yeah, we have.
How many bands do you have? This is why I get confused between you and your brother. You have all these different bands, and you play drums, but you're working on guitar.
Yeah, no, I play guitar. I'm in a new band, the Petty Union, and we're debuting at Fitzgerald's December 20th. So,
You heard it here first.
And-
I'm
and-
going. I'm in. I'm
and
buying the
Rebecca,
tickets.
Rebecca Jordan, who walked in the door, she's one of the female background vocalists in the Petty band. So there you
My God, another.
Get her.
Wow,
I don't think we
Rebecca.
have any more. Over there. Squeeze in behind here.
go. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's my shameless
What a
plug.
treat.
Let's go back to the Wilsons.
You should go to that. It's my birthday.
Hey,
It's your birthday?
there you
Awesome.
go.
You know,
See a
Hope
double
loves.
exclusive,
My wife
heard
loves
here
Tom Petty.
first.
I'm going to bring her.
We're huge Petty fans. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And who gave Tom Petty guitar lessons when he was young?
You just told me this 2
Don
days
Felder.
ago.
Don
Yeah, Don
Felder.
Felder, the Eagles.
Yeah.
You think me
Who?
owning a record store, I should know this
You
stuff.
should,
Yeah, really.
These are trivia questions you should know.
That's why your panel is here.
Yeah, that's
for
right.
you.
Yeah, right. That's why I'm sitting over here, leave it up to the
Well,
guys.
Guitar lessons for 40, Bill.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, who taught Steve Miller how to play guitar?
Steve Miller, how to play guitar?
Yes. When he was just a kid, who started teaching him lessons?
Or is it one of his heroes? Was it Les Paul? Is
Yes,
that
it
what,
was.
Whoa, Les
Wow.
Paul, no kidding.
The Wizard of Waukesha.
Yes.
That's
Yeah, that's
I
right.
believe his
That's
family
right.
moved from Michigan or something to Waukesha and
Waukesha.
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 Yeah.
Waukesha.
Waukesha. Don't mess that up.
Anyway, but I forget the story, but his dad and Les Paul became friends and they were in business together or something, and that's how it all started rolling out. And he was teaching Steve how to play guitar, and when he got a little bit older, became a studio musician, and then
Well,
the rest is
what other
history.
famous rock musician went to high school with Steve Miller, was in his first band in high school?
Jim, you're getting too
good
deep
one.
now. This is.
Where did he start?
You're supposed
Yeah,
to be the
we're
I
writer.
know.
getting
No,
rolling.
I don't go that deep.
Boss Skaggs.
Oh, I did not know that.
That's
Awesome.
right. I forgot about that.
Cool.
That he was in his early bands.
Yeah, they went to high school
Awesome.
together.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could keep going just on Steve
Yeah.
Miller.
I'm
with all
smarter
the
than
John
you
Lee
are.
Hooker albums he played.
Oh my God, no.
As my wife said, she'd never met a person with so much useless information.
Yeah, oh
in
my
their
God,
brain.
yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I think all us guys are
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Richie Blackmore's first band.
His first band? Oh, what were they called? Well, I know he. Oh boy.
Screaming Lord Such.
Oh, he was with him?
He was in a band.
He was
He was
with-
in a band before Screaming Lord Such. Oh yes. Yeah. That's why I was like.
Yeah, Lord
that's
Such
good
had a lot of
question.
people in
Very
his-
good question.
Nice job.
Yes.
Way to go, Joel.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about Arthur Brown.
Yeah. I am the god of hell.
Hellfire, and I bring to you fire.
Fire.
Don't get a burn.
You guys should have brought all your instruments.
That was hilarious, that video. Okay, we're getting off track.
All right. Yeah, we'll speed through this a little bit. This is Paul Rogers, another one of the best voices of all time.
Right.
God, yeah.
This was when he was at Bad Company, and of course, he was with Free, which I actually like better than Bad Company. I thought Paul Kossoff was an amazing guitarist, and All Right Now I think is one of the top 10 rock songs of all
very
time.
Fantastic band.
But Bad Company was excellent too, and Paul Rogers' voice to this day is still really good.
Yeah, he's another one like how we talked about. And Rogers to this day it's like his voice hasn't changed.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Incredible.
yeah. And I think the next picture is him today. This was taken at it was in Aurora, Ribfest, at the Ribfest.
Oh, Naperville?
Yeah, Naperville. Did I say Aurora?
Ribfest,
Yeah, Naperville Ribfest.
Yeah, that's a huge deal.
Yeah. Great song.
Great shot.
I saw E.L.
Thank you.
at Rockfest in Sheboygan.
Do you know that it's supposed to have like a delay on here?
Yeah,
Because
there's like a 15-second delay.
yeah, I would say if it's matching up with people watching, or is it different?
No, it's fine.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Because I'm just saying, I'm still on the Ann Wilson picture.
Wow.
Yeah. Don't look at
That's
that.
Yeah, don't look at that.
Yeah.
Should I
No,
talk?
that's not Paul Rogers.
I'll talk slower.
No, it's not you, it's me.
Here's one of my favorite bands back in the day, Ronnie Montrose and his band Montrose, which was the lead singer was Sammy Hagar, who, obviously went on with Van Halen and stuff like that.
The Red Rocker.
But
Yeah.
but Ronnie Montrose, an extraordinary talent. He also played on albums of Van Morrison and a lot of other people. Very good acoustic player as well.
Edgar Winter.
And Edgar Winter, the famous the two
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein and Free Ride.
right.
He's on. And the cool part is I got to be friends with him, and through he played at Penny Road Pub, which is a
God, I
bar.
remember that bar.
And after the show, like I said, I had pictures on his reissue, which he had no clue about. And so I asked the guy, I said, "Can I go talk to Ronnie?" He goes, "No, yeah, I don't think you can." I said, and I said, "These are my pictures. I just want to show them." He said, "Well, you got 1 minute."
1 minute.
So I went up there and I showed Ronnie the pictures. We talked 45 minutes.
Nice.
And about
Very
music
cool.
and this and that. And he said, "Hey, next time I'm in town, I'd like to invite you to my show." And he played Reggie's, which is downtown,
Okay, sure.
on the south
South
side
side,
of
yeah.
was that
How
State Street.
cool is that?
And we hung out, and And unfortunately, 2 months after that, he killed himself.
Yeah.
Um,
Had
You
stomach
communicated with his
cancer or
wife,
something.
too?
Lisa, yeah.
Yeah, he had.
Right?
Yeah.
He was fighting. I think he was it prostate cancer originally had. It doesn't
I forget
matter.
what
But
cancer he had, and he beat it.
He had a tough battle with
But
his health
according
issues.
to Lisa, what I understand, what she told me was that he was also depressive. And I hate to be talking out of school if I'm wrong here,
Yeah.
but and he didn't feel he was as good as he used to be.
Yeah.
It was something like that.
Right.
But he was great to me. And if you want to flip to the next picture,
You know, just one quick on his early albums, you know, he had that really crunch to his guitar sound, and I'm not sure what kind of pedals he was using, but he was playing through a $90 Fender amp that he had bought at a yard sale. So, you know, you don't need stacks of Marshall sometimes to,
Right.
You're right.
you know, to get that sound.
Well, the first picture, that guitar right there, that Les Paul. This is his 58. This is a very iconic instrument because that's the Rock Candy guitar right there.
Oh, is that?
really?
Yes, that is it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and again, I played with Ronnie at the Park West, and a super nice guy. Just
Wasn't
a
he wonderful?
super nice guy. You know.
Yeah,
So yeah, what a loss.
Yeah, this is one of the Penny Road pictures. And like I said, when I went and saw him at Reggie's, and we talked before the show like an hour and a half, and I brought Lisa Torm, who I mentioned earlier, interviewed him, and that was all written up, and he was just so nice. And Lisa, his wife, was also involved with the conversations, and they actually did a program for her. Sammy Hagar put it together, and one of the pictures they used for the posters was my picture to promote the concert, and it was all these other people paying tribute to him. But yeah, I you know, we were talking earlier before we went on the air about taking it hard when our guys are dying today. I probably took Ronnie's the hardest because I just couldn't believe it, because you know, when I saw him 2 months prior, you know, I didn't think anything was wrong.
Yeah. Sorry.
But phenomenal guitar player. I'm sorry?
It's not a PRS. I can't remember what model he's playing there. No. Don't worry, it'll hit me at 3 in the morning. I'll text you.
Yeah, right.
I'll text you at 3.
One thing too, like with another same deal with Ronnie, like we talked about Rory, is when people talk about Montrose, they talk about Sammy Hagar.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's, I mean, Sammy's great, absolutely, but it's
Yeah.
Ronnie Montrose.
That's
man.
right.
Well, and then
He
and
was
that
so overlooked.
and that
Yeah.
first album is one of the best albums of all time.
Oh,
I think.
yeah.
It's an iconic
Every
classic
song,
rock album.
yeah.
I mean, for a band to come out with a debut album, every single song on there is unbelievable.
It just kicks ass.
But again-
plain and simple.
But
right
again,
there.
that picture you took, so again, that's an iconic picture because that Les Paul has not been photographed that often. And the reason I know it's that guitar is it has these 4 dings at the bottom of the guitar on the top right there. That is, they call that the STP Les Paul because he put an STP sticker up there by the toggle switch. And that guitar actually became a collector's choice guitar for Gibson. This Ronnie Montrose 58.
You mean the STP oil sticker?
That's correct.
The old
remember?
sticker?
Everybody had that sticker on their bumper at one
everyone.
time, right?
Yeah, right.
That he put that on that
You want
guitar.
to go
so-
deep? Guess who else did that? The STP sticker.
I don't know.
The guitars from Can Heat.
Oh,
Yeah, between the
Henry Vestine?
Oh yeah.
yeah.
You mean the
That's
original?
And the Woodstock footage.
Or Wilson? Or the rhythm guitar player? The lead guitar player was
The guy who
Henry
did the slide,
Vestine.
so I'm-
Oh, that was the blues guy. The guy who played harmonica too. His last name is Wilson.
Don't remember.
Was that a thing?
The STP stickers.
I don't know.
So again, an iconic
Yeah.
image.
Right,
from
right.
the man.
That's why I
Capture.
took it. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
This is backstage with Black Sabbath, 74. And
Didn't I say?
Is that what you said, 74?
that's okay. And the reason I put this picture in here is just how lucky I was. Like I said, starting to go backstage at 19 and seeing Black Sabbath the year before on their tour, and now, you know, sitting in the audience, and now I'm backstage with them. It was pretty damn cool.
Yeah, that's as cool as it gets.
Was it?
The first concert was Black Sabbath.
Like we were looking at this earlier, like Joe pointed out, Tony Iommi, no mustache.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath.
And if you ever
That was
saw him
Bloody
with Jethro Tull, he didn't have a mustache either.
Yeah, he was with
Thanks for
Telephone.
bringing that up. A lot of people don't
Wait,
know
you know,
that.
we
Before
have
Martin
to.
Barr.
When you have some free time, what is your rate?
We're just going to do a
join it?
trivia podcast.
We gotta do Jeopardy, rock and roll
Yeah,
Jeopardy.
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
What is?
again,
It's-
as Rebecca says, there's a lot of useless information.
Thank you. I was
Yeah.
just going to grab
Oh
that.
my God.
Right here.
There he is.
Oh,
he
that-
was on the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus.
The Stones did not want that released for the longest
There's a
time.
good reason for that.
Yeah.
They were all high on LSD.
Well, they definitely didn't like the way. I thought some of it was pretty good. I was really excited when it came
what's
out.
really cool? I mean, the music. Honestly, the deal with this was there was basically a party they put
Exactly.
together, and everybody
That's-
was messed up, and they just had fun.
Ex-
But what's really cool about it is all the people that were there,
Yes.
and I think it was the Dirty Mac Band.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you
right.
Stones,
never get that.
Lennon,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jethro Tull,
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mitch
I just-
Mitchell.
Tim,
yeah.
Mitch Mitchell.
This
right.
is the difference between now and then. You would never today get that. Everything is so prepackaged and marketed. You would
Yeah.
never today get that sort of impromptu as you can get. I mean, but you would never get that loose conglomeration of people just coming together and playing.
Right.
The suits wouldn't allow it.
No.
The record companies wouldn't allow it. The managers wouldn't allow it, etc.
Yeah.
And we're missing something today because today we got the Masked Singer. I mean,
God, don't even get me started.
Moving
Yeah.
on.
Moving on.
Don't even get started on that. That's a whole nother podcast.
Rod Stewart, one of my
Rod
favorite
the
singers.
Mod.
I keep saying all these people, great voice, my favorite singers. I mean, there's
Yeah,
not many I don't like.
they are, or they wouldn't be in here.
Yeah, but that's why you were there. You
Yeah.
understood.
This is one of the last. It might have been the last Faces tour, if I'm not mistaken. By this time, Ronnie Lane had left, and I can't remember the Japanese fellow. Yamaguchi, was that his name?
Oh, the guitar player.
The bass player took over for Ronnie Lane. He was Japanese.
Right.
Ronnie Wood was the guitarist.
Right.
He's with him for a while because you see him like the old '80s videos. He's playing.
Yeah.
He was in a lot of the '80s albums. Yeah, I can't think of his name though.
But to talk about spectacle, Rod Stewart would dress
Right.
up, and
Again,
it's
I
just
know that.
just a
What
lot
a
of fun.
great outfit that is.
Yeah.
It's the coolest.
Okay, next one.
I think Steven Tyler kind of ripped him off.
Oh,
Right.
yeah, I was gonna say just real quick, and thanks for saying that because, and this is just a personal opinion, so don't call in and yell at me. But they always say Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, they're the Toxic Twins.
Yes.
Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood were the original Toxic
The original.
Twins because, in fact, they're said that it's down there considered the first rock and roll stars of that era because nobody was living that lifestyle at the time that they were the drugs, the women, the party. You know what I'm
In
saying?
that order?
In that order, yeah. It could
wanna make
change
sure.
any given night,
Yeah.
but no, it's like they were living that rock and roll lifestyle back then when nobody else was.
Yeah, and maybe even Jeff Beck and Rod Stewart were a predecessor to that.
Yes, very good.
They just played the Hollywood Bowl together,
nice.
and I saw YouTube, and Rod's has throat cancer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, some kind of. I
didn't
think
either.
Eddie Van Halen's got the throat
Yes,
cancer.
yeah.
He's got something wrong with him, and I just felt bad because it didn't. I mean, Jeff Beck was still incredible. They did Morning Dew,
Oh God.
from the first album, the Truth album,
Truth
and
and
it's,
Beckola.
yeah, he just didn't. Rod Stewart just didn't have the voice, and at the end of it, and Rod Stewart still has a sense of humor, and he was done, and he looked at Jeff Beck, and he goes, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Something like
I
that.
tried.
I gave it a shot.
Yeah.
It's okay. He's
Right.
he's a legend.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
He's paid his dues.
Yeah, the Who were just
Alright.
there.
He's paid his
Now,
dues.
where was this shot taken?
Bob Dylan was at the Chicago Stadium,
Dylan.
and it was the tour of '74 with the band.
Oh, sweet.
So I do have a picture
Before
of,
the flood. Was that the name of the tour?
It might have been. I don't recall. But I remember always liking the band. And they played first, then they played together. But Robbie Robertson knocked me out.
Oh yeah.
I didn't realize how good of a guitar player he was. And if you watch the last waltz, then you
Yeah.
could see how good he was. But
Phenomenal band.
but yeah, it was
No pun.
it was really really a great show, and I always liked Dylan, but I wasn't crazy about him until I saw the
Right.
show, and then I just fell in love with him.
Yeah. He will be in Milwaukee in 2 weeks.
Yes,
Yeah.
at the rave of
That's
all
right.
places.
Yes.
You know,
the
speaking,
Yeah.
And I will be
Rave.
there. I got
Or
tickets.
the upstairs, the Eagles
You know,
ballroom you'll be in.
That's right.
Speak-
It's still the
Speak-
rave, but it's upstairs.
speaking of the band, the band literally changed Eric Clapton's trajectory in terms of his career, because when he heard them, he always felt that he wasn't a complete musician, and he wanted to focus more on songcraft and being part of a group rather than just being, a guitar solo artist. And when he heard music from Big
Big
Pink,
Pink.
it changed his life. So
Right.
they were an important.
Oh, they were
Stepping
a huge
stepping
influence
stone,
on
for
a
sure.
lot of musicians.
Yeah.
Them and
the band.
Delaney and Bonnie. Huge-
Delaney,
and Bonnie, yeah.
exactly.
Oh, God, that's-
Another. There was
No, but you're right. An absolute huge stepping stone. It changed his
Delaney
career.
and Bonnie were just.
Delaney and
I-
Bonnie were a huge
huge.
transition
They-
for Clapton.
Clapton.
And Harrison.
I know this is digressing, but there was a real coming together of, Clapton, who was a Brit, and the Tulsa, the southern
Russell's
R&B people,
Right.
And I think that's what makes music so wonderful. Is you've got rock music, is you got people coming from these different areas, representing different
different
forms, and then
styles.
Yeah, all
coming
the
together.
influences. Yeah. for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Bonnie and Delaney were they were the group. If you needed time away from shit in your
Well,
life, you went on
oh
tour
my
with
God,
them
well,
and
I-
they cured you.
Well,
You know what I mean?
One story, and I saw a documentary, and when Clapton had, Bobby Whitlock from the Dominoes and all these guys, Bonnie, all come over to his Surrey mansion to help him record that Eric Clapton solo album. They made a mess of his place. Bonnie and Delaney said Clapton had, and Bobby Whitlock, I think, said that. He said Clapton had no idea what a bunch of southern rednecks we were, because they came over, Clapton and the Brits were different kind of culture, and they just made a friggin'
Just came
mess
over and
of his.
tore it up.
They tore his house. They filthied it up, and it was just. They kind of laughed about it back then, but.
My favorite
There we
guitarist, Jeff Beck.
Yeah.
There you go.
Another guy who never stood on his laurels and kept changing and changing and changing and changing. And whether you like what he doesn't care.
No.
He's going to do what he wants to do. And sometimes, especially when Blow by Blow came out, after the Rough and Ready band with Bob Tench, and I heard that the first time, it's like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, right.
And then
Did
you
you
listen-
like it?
Not at first.
Really, I loved it.
And
It
then-
knocked
I did
me
too.
out.
I
And
did
that was
too.
the
And then-
changer for me.
Yeah,
That
and
was
then
it. Yeah, that's when I really.
But I'm saying as it went along,
Yeah.
Blow by Blow, and then was
Yeah.
the next one.
And again,
Yeah,
there's
just-
the
There
blow
you-
by blow guitar right
Yeah.
there.
But he's just every time I've seen him, he's been.
You were always in the right place at the right time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
right.
you.
Really, I mean, it's incredible.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
No, I'm just
I was
saying.
going to ask Pete a question another
No,
time.
go ahead.
Listen. You work on guitars, and here's another example. Beck moved from a Les Paul to a Fender, and Clapton has done it, and a lot of guys have done it.
Yeah.
What is the primary difference between the kinds of sounds of the Stratocaster? I know you can put any kind of pickups.
Well, I
and
think what
use-
happens is what you were saying earlier is that this influence of all, like for Clapton, all these outside influences changed his direction. It's the same thing when you're playing a Les Paul, you just have this certain vibe, this certain sound to it, and when you go to a Strat, it makes you change direction. So every time you're playing a different guitar, it really puts you in a different headspace, and you think about eclectic moments in time. So if I'm playing a Les Paul, I'm going to think of Jeff Beck, the Allman Brothers, things like that. And then I think of a Strat, I'll think of Clapton and Hendrix and
Right.
those signature tones.
Like you're channeling
So it
that.
starts to get your mind going in that direction. Where did that come from? What are the roots of that? And therefore you start to write different music. And again, not to change the subject, but being in this petty band and really studying this music for 2 years, I have to have a minimum of 7 guitars to pull that off. Because you have the Telecaster and a Gretsch, so that the Gretsch vibe brings me to George Harrison and things like. Every guitar represents a different sound, and that's what's so cool about it.
Do you have any Rickenbackers at all?
Oh yeah, double neck Rickenbacker.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
The great Alvin Lee was Wood's famous Woodstock guitar.
The big red guitar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Big Red. That was the name of it.
Another exciting showman. Another underrated as far as I'm
yeah.
concerned.
Absolutely.
That's what I was gonna say. That
Absolutely.
as fantastic as his Woodstock performance was, it kind of hurt him.
Yes.
Because everybody goes back to that. Oh, Alvin Lee. Oh yeah, Woodstock. They did this. Yeah, but what about the rest of their album? Like, the guy had unbelievable music.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to take away from Woodstock, but it kind of shut him down from other things he did.
Yeah, it tended to define him a little bit more than he wanted.
That's the word I was looking for.
Shoehorned him. Shoehorned
See,
him.
words
Right,
by Mark
yeah.
Plotnick.
Yeah.
See right there.
Here.
And for good reason.
Yeah.
This is Don Felder of the Eagles playing at the Arcada. Another guy I knew was a good guitarist. I just didn't realize how good he was. He just blew me away.
Yeah. Incredible guitar.
When he does Hotel California, which he co-wrote, he brings out the double neck and plays his part in Joe Walsh's part.
Right.
And just an incredible performance. And I was very fortunate to meet him and talk to him briefly. And
He did a promo with
Yeah,
you
that's-
in our
that's
book.
on
I
here.
mean,
he was just
the
very
Eagles,
nice.
Don Felder, and he lent support to our book with a picture, and
That's awesome.
it's just amazing for a guy of this stature to do that. It's,
Right.
And the guy doesn't need the money, obviously. I'm sure he makes a ton off the Eagles' Greatest Hits album, which is still
yeah,
selling.
right. One of the most top-selling albums.
But he's got a new album out, and last time I saw him, he played a couple songs from it, and it was excellent. And
Yeah, in fact, I had that in here a few months back. It's a great
All
album.
American
Yes.
something, yeah. So, next one. This is Gene Simmons of Kiss, and the reason it's kind of a cool picture is A, he doesn't have the Kiss makeup.
he doesn't have his tongue out.
He doesn't have his tongue out,
Hey, that's
and he
Fire.
Yeah.
he has no sunglasses on.
Right, yeah, right.
And he took them off for very brief, maybe a part of this song, and then he looked off stage and got the smile, and that's the picture.
Awesome.
But he called everyone on stage. He called like 100 people on stage to sing with him
Oh, very
for
cool.
the big Kiss song, "Rock and Roll All Night Long."
Right.
So that was kind of cool. And this was at the Arcada.
That is very cool because, I don't know, I mean, all I've ever heard was he's not a very good person to get along, or a very easy person to get along with, and doesn't like people taking pictures or doing this and doing that. So
Yeah.
for him to be looking like right at you, smiling like that is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Well, we went out and had a couple beers, and
Nice.
no, we didn't.
Oh, come on.
and he made you pay, right?
Yeah. I
yeah,
paid.
yeah, right. And you had to buy some Kiss memorabilia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
He's a hell of a businessman. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
you know,
All I
He's
know,
a marketing genius.
he is a marketing genius. Yeah,
And-
like him or not.
one thing I want to say about a lot of these artists, the Don Felders of the world and Gene Simmons, is the musicians they've been surrounding themselves with are out of this world great.
Yeah.
And they're obviously a lot younger. I mean, because all the guys are 60s and 70s.
Right.
And most of these guys in the bands are 30s and 40s. But they're getting their pick of who they want. And
Sure.
obviously it's quite an honor for these guys to be playing with
Playing
Gene
with
Simmons
them,
or Felder
yeah.
or whomever it might be.
Yeah.
And they are awesome. And the musicianship is as I said earlier about your band Dinosaur Exhibit. I that's what gets me is how good these people are,
Sure.
and it's such a joy.
Well, and again, and I think Clapton said this, and that when you surround yourself with better musicians than you are, it helps rise you and elevate
Oh,
you.
it's only
And these guys are
natural,
just as
yeah.
smart.
It-
They're just
it's
as
smart, yeah.
smart to do that. You
Yeah.
know.
Sure.
And again, you know, their latest drummer, I think their latest drummer, he's been in with them 20 years, Eric Singer.
Oh, yeah, Eric
right.
Singer.
You know,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's
yeah.
been
The
in,
new guy.
the new
Yeah.
guy, right?
Yeah.
So he's been in Black Sabbath and
Right,
countless
yeah, played a
bands,
few
you know.
bands.
So yeah, they're very, very smart.
Right, and like Jim was saying, like these guys picking the new and upcoming guys. I mean, what an honor for them to be playing with these guys. But then, like you said, then he's going back. You know, these guys are helping me keep going into the future,
Absolutely.
changing my style.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, it's a win-win when everybody comes together, like helping each other musically.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Obviously, these are ZZ Top.
The Bearded Wonders.
And just the lighting was hitting them. This was also at the Rip Fest in Naperville. I actually ran into Billy Gibbons in a restaurant in Hollywood. And he's just sitting at the bar with another guy. And usually I don't like to bother people. I mean, every once in a while we all run into somebody famous. And I thought, well, hell, I have to.
Right.
So I went up and I just said, Billy, thank you. You know, I appreciate your music. Yeah, thank you, man. Hey, how you doing? And he starts chatting with me, you know, and I was trying to say, well, I'm gonna let you go. I know you're enjoying your drink, and he was just very, very nice.
Nice.
Very nice.
That's awesome.
You know, I don't remember the guy, and I introduced myself to the guy, and I said, I like what you do for a living too.
Whatever it is you do.
Yeah, and he laughed, so I think that's what made them talk to me for another 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But anyway. There's Buddy Guy.
Sweet.
You know, he's what they say Hendrix would be playing like today if he was around. Who knows? But still out there. He's still playing.
A legend.
I've got a very cool story with Buddy Guy. I just recently had in the store, and I'm probably going to say his name wrong, but Bob Costas. He
Yep.
owned the Chicago Jazz and Blues Smart.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Well, he started Delmart Records
Yes.
way back when and produced all these guys. And he was telling me, and luckily I had my own albums here because I had Junior Wells' Hoodoo Blues. So he was showing me on that album, Buddy Guy played guitar and sang on it,
right.
but he was under contract with somebody else. They couldn't use his name. So he
What-
said him and Buddy and Junior, a couple other guys are all sitting around brainstorming, what can we call him? Well, let's see, his name's Buddy, friendly guy. If he was in England, he'd be a chap. Friendly chap. Well, that's what it says on the back of the album, guitar, friendly chap. I'm like, that's amazing. Who would ever know that?
I'm one of the
Can I-
greatest
can I-
Chicago blues.
Oh,
Can I
God,
can I
yeah.
tell just a real quick story about Junior Wells? As long as
Absolutely.
you're talking about. Years ago, I attended a concert with Junior Wells and who was opening for Freddie King. I can't remember the venue. It was one of these small suburban Chicago area venues, and Eric Clapton had produced an album, and it played out on the album with Junior Wells and Buddy Guy. It's a rare album, and I can't remember the name of it, but being a big Eric Clapton fan, I go up to Junior Wells and I go, not even aware of the status of this man. I said, "What was it like playing with Eric Clapton?" And he goes, and by the way, Eric Clapton to this day is so embarrassed about the album because he was so high and out of it. And Junior Wells goes, "Eric was playing his ass off, man, but he didn't start this stuff. Listen to Buddy Guy.
Yeah.
It was Buddy. Buddy was doing this before Clapton was." And I just realized how little I understood about music at that young age. And I just kind of
I'm sorry.
walked away. I'm sorry. I swear maybe I was 19. I don't remember. Whatever. I'll never forget that. And it was such an embarrassment. And I still to this day remember. And, you know, these guys were the originators.
Right.
But it
Oh,
teaches
yeah.
you to dig deep, doesn't it?
It taught me a lesson. It taught me a lesson.
Nice.
Eric played his ass off, but he didn't start this stuff.
Clapton, he's just a kid. What does
Yeah,
he know?
really.
This is my
there we
buddy
go.
Kim Simmons. This was taken at Fitzgerald's. And like I said, every time he comes to town, they'll be coming to town in November. They're playing the Brower House in Lombard. And I joke with them. His rhythm section that he has now is the longest running Savoy Brown band of 9 or 10 years. Because if you remember the early Savoy Browns, like every album's a new
different band.
Oh
member.
God,
Yeah.
are you kidding?
you know. And some shows they've been doing together with Foghat, and it's really
nice.
good because then they jam at the end. And obviously, if people know rock and roll, Foghat came from Savoy Brown.
Right.
But still a marvelous, marvelous guitar player, and he keeps moving on. And their new album, as I said earlier, is called City Lights. It's excellent, all blues, and it has 35 of my photos in it that I've
Very
taken through the
cool.
years. But very, very nice man.
Yes, he
as
is.
is the whole band.
Yes,
Oh,
he
yeah.
is.
Very
I've
nice guys.
worked on one of his guitars too. He's
Oh, did
Oh,
you?
really?
he's a sweetheart. Yeah, yep, great guy.
Yeah, he lives in upstate New York.
Yeah, and I introduced Mark to him about a year or two ago, and so
Yeah.
we're talking, and Mark knows all the technical stuff of instruments, and I don't. So he starts talking to Kim Simmons about his guitar and things like that, and Kim goes to him, "I like this guy. He knows what he's talking about. I like this guy."
I've always, what pedals are they using? What amplifiers? What pickups? What kind of cymbals
How do you
and
get that
drums?
sound, right?
Yeah, it
that's
just fascinated me. And but here's what I know that Jim talks about this a lot. You know, in talking with these guys, Jim finds out that, you know, once you stop talking about music, sometimes they just want to talk about all these other things. Like, for example, he was telling us that he's a great cook. And he's a master in making Indian curries. And I said, Kim, how do you find Indian food in upstate New York? He says, well, that's why I make my own curries.
Yeah, right.
You know, coming from England, you know, London, you throw a stone and you're hitting another Indian restaurant. So these guys are interesting people beyond the music. And a lot of times they just appreciate, as Jim has said many times, just talking about family and
Normal
people and
things,
normal
yeah.
things.
Yeah.
How's your wife? How your grandkids?
Well, that's why.
How's the lumbago?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I talk to him about every time. I remember one time we had a conversation. Well, this lasted an hour about dogs, and for some reason, here's a guy who's going all the country, and I have really bad knee replacement. He always says, "Hey, how's your knees?" First thing he asks me all the time.
Yeah.
I said, "Why do you
How's your
remember
knee?"
this? I see you once a year. Do you always remember this?"
Yeah.
A great guy.
Well, he's been playing Dean Zielinski guitars from
Yeah.
I'm playing Dean a
as
couple
of
things.
late, and that's how I met him through Dean because
Okay.
I worked with Dean for some years.
Dean's a great guy.
Plug for
too.
Dean Zielinski.
Yeah, great
a
guitars.
great guitar maker
Yep.
They're
and,
amazing.
and a great guy.
and
Yeah.
a really nice man.
He was
Yes.
at the dinosaur show the other night.
I
Did
know.
you know
I know
he was in
Dean.
the room.
I
Did
know
you
Dean.
see him?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome.
I sat with his wife. I know his wife Susie.
Yeah,
We're going to
Susie.
get together and play cards.
Great
No,
people. Yeah.
very nice man.
That's awesome.
These are the two young ladies who are in charge of the library and archives at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, holding
Very
our book.
Awesome.
That's Mark on the left. This is Don Felder of the Eagles holding up. What I'm doing with one of my books is I've never been an autograph seeker, and I really don't have a lot of autographs for all these people I met. But when the book came out, I thought this would be kind of cool to get them to sign their pictures. So I started doing that, and I asked them to, if they're in the book, I asked them to pose with me, and for the most part, everyone has been very, very open to do it.
Very cool.
So this is Don Felder of the Eagles. We'll run through these kind of quick because I'll just say who they are. This is Danny Serafin, the drummer of Chicago. No, I will run through these.
You running out of stories already?
No, I got tons of stories. This is Felix Cavalieri from the Rascals.
Very cool.
Andy Powell of Wishbone Ash. Glenn Hughes of Deep Purple.
There you go.
Starting to find out too.
They just played in Milwaukee Sunday, Deep Purple.
Martin Barr, Jethro Tull. And that's Roger Earl, drummer of Foghat.
Very shy.
Yeah. And that's it. Those are the
Awesome.
pictures.
Great
But
stuff.
it's just kind of cool. And I've got many more. of them posing with the book, but they've just been really, really nice.
That's awesome when people are just nice and down to earth, friendly. They're up to what you're doing. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, for the most part, I'd say 95% of them are very approachable and will talk to you. And
Right.
Here's one of them right here.
and there's one.
Right there, see? There he goes.
Yeah.
He's on page one.
Yeah, in the next edition.
He's on page.
Next edition, yes.
He's
Volume 2.
You're after the index somewhere.
Yeah, there we go.
In the fine print.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, these guys and ladies are just really, really, really cool.
No, that's fantastic.
And,
though.
some-
You find like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I said sometimes you get to talk 1 minute, and sometimes you get to talk 20 minutes. It all
Sure.
depends.
But
And
have you found though, and I think you've already said this, but I mean, not only just with making the book, but in your career as a photographer and writer and coming across people like this, you find more of them are outgoing, just want to talk, and they're cool about it. And
like I said, 95%.
right,
You get the occasional.
Yeah, you're gonna
leave me
you're gonna
alone
get the
kind of thing.
Ones over here
You know,
that.
Yeah.
It's true. I used to do a lot of interviews. I was a trade magazine editor at one time, and I used to have to come up with some good questions and interview a lot of corporate executives. And people like to talk. I mean, you sit down and you get to know them, and they like to talk.
Right. Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of times you get a public image, and then there's something, private image is very nice.
that we don't know.
Exactly, Tim.
And
right.
a lot of time you meet somebody, maybe they don't want, I don't have time. Whatever. Maybe they're having a bad day. They're human.
Exactly.
That's
just it.
You can't please.
Well, it has to be expected because, most of these iconic rock stars, they're always getting hounded. So
Right.
how much of that can you take?
That's what I
It's-
mean.
it's tough.
They gotta have a day where it's like,
Yeah.
look, man, thank you, but
Yeah.
Well, I just.
Well, I just wanted to ask
Yeah.
Pete a question here. So have you ever had days when you just, whether it was a headache, maybe your hand was hurting you, days that you just felt that you couldn't perform but had to go on anyways?
Oh yeah, that happens more often not
More
now
often than
because
not.
the older you get, the harder
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, I know that at your last show, Jerry Smith, the bass player, was either suffering from the
He
flu
was ill
or
the night
he was
before
ill.
because
Yeah.
he ate something. He was in Mexico 2 days prior.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So he didn't. Yeah, had
no
some,
wonder he wasn't looking at the food
yeah,
that night.
That's right.
he drank the
wasn't,
water.
but-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
No, there's stuff that comes up, but I really make it a point after a show, as you know, I go out and meet and greet.
do,
I hope everybody in the venue because
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's
fantastic.
important. I mean, who are you without your fans?
Right.
Yeah, you
But that's unfortunate. It's part of the deal that a lot of people
No,
seem to
you're right.
forget that
You're
along
right.
the
Well,
way.
and again, I've never gone through what most of these people have gone through.
Right.
So,
I will
but I don't take
say-
it for granted. I don't.
I will say, I mean, I've been pretty blessed with getting opportunities to meet some of my heroes, whatever,
Yeah.
that people I looked up to growing up, and for the most part, it was just like us sitting here shooting the shit, nothing, like. I remember a few years back, I was invited to Harvey Mandel, big
Oh my
Chicago
God,
blues
Harvey
guy.
Mandel.
He was going through cancer at the
Yeah.
time, and his sister Rose had put on a big thing to raise money and stuff to kind of help him out.
I
And
think you have a pic.
yes, hanging up over there.
Over there, yeah.
With the Stones album,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, meeting Harvey, Corky Siegel was there. A lot of the guys, because Harvey played in Canned Heat, a lot of
Yes,
those guys.
yes.
I guess I should step back and say
Wow.
this was his birthday party that I got invited to down in Chicago because they were doing a charity, and I kind of helped out with that, and I got invited. But I'm down there like, I'm in awe. Oh my God, there's so-and-so, there's
Yeah.
so-and-so. But it was like, as soon as I started mingling and meeting people, it was nothing. It was, hey, how you doing, man? And we're talking about the weather or
No, you're right. Once
whatever.
they break the ice,
It was like, wow, these guys are just like me.
yeah, they are.
You know,
Yeah,
just great people.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I, in fact, because Harvey had even said, he knew about this shop, and he's like, if you want, grab an armful of records, bring them down. We'll have guys sign them and stuff for you. Okay, that's fantastic. And you get there, and it's like, Now I'm like, I don't want to be that guy, you know. Hey, would you sign this one?
Yeah.
They came to me, go, hey, you brought out, hey, what do you got? Let me see, you know. And
Well-
they started looking through and wanting to sign them and stuff.
Well, I want to be that guy because I came here to have these guys sign this book.
Yeah.
Today, so
Today it's acceptable.
One before we end here, just one shameless plug, and it's actually not for us. Gentleman by the name of Ron Romero is the creator and board chairman of the future Illinois Rock and Roll Museum. And
In Joliet.
In Joliet. They're trying to get this museum off the ground. They're trying to rehab a 3-story building. Jim and I were there. He asked for permission to use some of Jim's photographs for the website and maybe for the museum. They're going to sell our book, and whatever sales result, a portion of that's going to go to the museum. But it's an ambitious project, and Ron hopes that it would be a real boost to the Joliet area and a real
That's amazing.
important place for tourism. If the plans become a reality, it's going to be an amazing place. It's going to have blues, rock, jazz. It's going to include, radio, history of radio in Illinois,
Very cool.
and even though we're Wisconsin, I'm a Packer fan, by the way.
Yeah.
Diehard Packer fan since childhood, because I have family from Milwaukee.
I wasn't going to have you write the book because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I met Hank Aaron and Jim Taylor and Paul Horning because my uncle had a record and camera store in the Bayshore Shopping Center many years ago
Wow.
when they were the Milwaukee Braves and when Green Bay was
yeah.
still playing at Milwaukee. So enough of that. But
Wow.
anyways, a little bit about the
museum.
the museum.
Well,
and,
I'm going to piggyback on that. Is right now they're starting nominations for either bands, artists on their website, and it could be anything from a venue or someone who was born in Chicago, or I should say Illinois. Bands from Illinois, obviously, you got Chicago, Cheap Trick, on and on and
Sure.
on. Little known fact: Ray Slick was born in Chicago, so she'd be eligible. Flipside Records, which was very big in the city. You can do that for a place. But anyway, go online. It's Rock and Roll Museum, Illinois Rock and Roll Museum and Hall of Fame, and nominations have started. And it's ambitious, and I think
that's
once it's
gonna be
going, it's going to be really,
amazing.
really cool.
yeah, they.
Have you been
Good
down
for
there?
them.
I have not, but we
Yeah.
were just talking about that Saturday night in the dressing room, and Ken Voss came down
Yeah.
to do interviews for the museum, for the
Yeah.
stories for the
Yeah,
museum,
that's
for,
great.
for the flock and the mods.
Excellent.
That's fantastic.
Excellent.
I mean, I wish there was more and more stuff like that being put together, I mean, like just here in Lake Geneva, I mean, there's such music history in
It
this
is.
town.
It is. It's rich everywhere.
You don't hear nothing about
You
it.
see, I
though.
would have never known that, but
Well, you never
said-
know where you're going to
There-
run
yeah,
into
yeah,
something.
no, I mean,
oh God, we had. Well, what,
Well, I
what
knew
was
you
it?
lived. You said that you lived
I'm
in
10
the
minutes
area,
from
but
here, yeah.
it was like, wow, you are really close to here.
He was the first one to jump on to page when I posted it on my store page. I'm gonna be there. Like R.I.P.
Yeah.
Well, for anybody who's listening, Jim and I are going to be in Milwaukee
Sunday
Sunday.
at the Chicago.
The Chicago Theater in
Now,
Milwaukee.
the record show.
Now, how is this going to work? The Packers are playing at 12 o'clock
Oh, boy.
against Oakland. What?
Well, they're going to win because the refs like them.
Yeah.
Oh, God, it's going back to the
So what's
Bear
the point of
Packer
watching?
thing. All right.
But
Oh, God.
But yeah, we've been doing Barnes and Noble and Barbara's bookstore book signings, which have been really a lot of fun. Got Chicagoland Record Store show coming up. Milwaukee one this Sunday,
And
and the
The
Joan
Milwaukee
Esposito.
Record
Joan
radio
Esposito, anchor, Chicago anchor from
November 7th, we're doing a
She
interview
has a
on her
new
radio
radio show.
Yeah, she
That's what we're
does.
going to be
Yeah.
on.
Right?
I wrote.
And we got faces for the radio, so this is
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
Perfect.
I sent Joan a book and a nice press kit, and she sent me back, and she said, "I love the book." 4 exclamation points.
Wow.
She said, I was like, so I said, Joan, what else you need from us? She said, just come on and have fun.
There you go.
So we're gonna have
Perfect.
fun.
See?
Awesome.
yeah.
Why don't you, before we disappear here, let everybody know where they can find the books and your website and everything?
All right. Well, obviously, as we said 1,000 times, classic rock photographs from yesterday and today. You could order it through my website.
Here.
JimSummariaPhoto.com. It's also on Amazon. It's also at most Barnes and Noble. It's at most Barbara bookstores. It's right here
At Black Circle.
at Black Circle Records in Lake Geneva.
If you're in Portland, it's at Powell's, the huge bookstore in Portland.
Yeah.
It's at, I think, the Music Instrument Museum of Phoenix, which is the largest museum of its kind in the world.
There, you hear that, Mom? If you're listening in Arizona, go get the book.
It's an incredible museum. It's just, I recommend everyone go there. There's nothing like it in the world.
It's online on Target,
yeah.
Walmart,
If you're at the
Amazon.
Music Gallery in Highland Park,
Yeah,
they
the
have
music
them.
gallery.
Oh, yeah, music gallery.
Thank you, Pete.
And a lot of other
A
record
great,
stores.
a great store with great guitars there. If you're ever in Highland Park, Illinois, and the book's here, right?
Trunk of my
Trunk
car.
in your car, yeah. If you see him driving around,
Yeah.
flag him down and give you
Yeah.
a book.
I got
really.
a Blackhawks license plate, so if you see me,
There you
Yeah.
I'm not giving out my license.
Yes,
plate. Forget about
we
it.
do have the book
Yeah,
here.
and that's right. Give this man the business here,
go. Tim's got it here.
and buy some records from Tim,
That's right.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
come see these guys play in all of his bands. This guy's
All of his bands.
he's the Lon Chaney, Lon Chaney, the man of a thousand
Chaney.
faces, the silent movie. This guy is in everything.
Yeah.
He might even be in one of the bands we just looked at. I don't know.
Well, I've played with most of them.
Yeah, he is. You're right.
On that note, it's been in the works for a while, but busy and schedules. But Pete actually was going to come in and do a podcast and with his Rick Derringer guitar.
Oh!
I have the guitar, a guitar, but it's the guitar that was on the cover of Rick Derringer All-American
oh yeah,
Boy record. That's Candy Apple Red Stratocaster. And this ties into my Johnny Winter story. But I bought this guitar in 1993 at the Chicago Vintage Guitar Show from Sandy Toronto, who was at the time, the guitarist with Edgar Winter White Trash. So that's how he got
great
to
band.
know Johnny. So Sandy's walking this guitar through the building, and I said, well, what's in the case? And he opens the guitar, and the red Strat's in there, and I'm like, he's like, yeah, this is the Rick Derringer Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo guitar. That was probably my favorite album. I wore that record out.
Great album.
So for Sandy to have this guitar, it blew me away. I had to have that guitar.
Right.
So Sandy and I struck a deal, and he sold that. He was gonna go to Japan, and he sold it to me instead of it going to Japan and nobody ever seeing the thing. And I put it on display in Chicago for many, many years. But the backstory of that guitar is it is probably the most iconic guitar, because John Hammond bought that guitar, gave it to Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan gave it to Mike Bloomfield during the Highway 61 recording. Mike Bloomfield gave it to Johnny Winter as a present. So it was originally
What a
Sunburst.
journey.
It's a 59 Strat, original Sunburst finish is still on it. Then Mike Bloomfield at one time painted everything purple because it was his favorite color. It was painted purple over the Sunburst. Johnny Winter did not like the purple when he got it from Mike Bloomfield. And Phil Kubicki at Fender refinished it Candy Apple Red. And Johnny did not, then after a while, he did not like the tremolo on it, and he put the stop tailpiece in it so he could play slide on this guitar.
Right.
So when the photo shoot for All American Boy came up, Rick had that silver lame jacket on. And the photographer just is like, no, there's nothing you have here that's working with that jacket. We need a red guitar. And he's like, well, I don't have a red guitar, but my friend Johnny Winter does.
Nice.
So they sent for the guitar. This is in New York City. They sent for the guitar over at Johnny's place. Rick ends up photographing that guitar for the album cover in the gatefold. And 2 weeks, so Rick had the guitar for 2 weeks before he gave it back to Johnny. So he kind of got familiar with the instrument. At a jam in New York City, at the Scene Club in New York City,
Scene.
there is a picture of this, of Sandy and Johnny playing together. And after the show, Johnny gave the guitar to Sandy as a Christmas present. The next day, Johnny rings up Sandy and says, "Do you have my red Strat?" And Sandy's like, "Yes, don't you remember?" And he's like, "No, it was kind of a foggy night, you know."
Yeah.
He's like, "You gave it to me as a present last night." And he says, "Well, I want my guitar back." And Sandy's like, "No, you Indian giver." And Johnny's like, "Okay, fine, you can keep it." So Sandy actually ended up touring with Edgar Winter with that red Strat.
Wow.
What a stead.
And I ended up playing with Sandy every Monday night at the China Club because he was the singer in the China Club band in the '93. He was the house band. Sandy Toronto, big Chicago personality, rock personality, and so that's the story of the guitar. And I bought the guitar.
Wow.
From him. It's right now. It's up at Dave's Guitars in La Crosse on display, so you can see it. It's always
Didn't
on.
you say,
It's always on public display somewhere because I want to share it with everybody.
Didn't you say Rick had come around?
Well,
doing
Rick
a
came to
show?
Chicago in '93 to the Lincoln Tap, and I called the Lincoln Tap because I had just. It was a few months after I bought the guitar, and I wanted Rick to sign it. So I called the Lincoln Tap, and the guy at the bar, I said, "I've got this guitar," and the guy's like, "Yeah, whatever." And,
Yeah.
and the phone goes down in the bar for like it's 10 minutes of silence, and then suddenly somebody comes to the phone and is like, "What's this?" It's Rick Derringer. I said, "I've got the rock and roll Huziku Strat." "Oh, wow, that's crazy," So I said, "Can I come on down and present it to you?" And sure. We go down there. From across the room, I open the case. He's like, "Oh, that's the guitar."
Yeah, that's
because it's so
awesome.
unique with the stop tailpiece on
Right.
it and the knurled telly knobs, so you could reach over the stop tailpiece to get to the controls. So it doesn't have some of those Strat things on there. It's unmistakable. So he was gracious enough to take pictures, sign
That
the
is
guitar.
too cool.
Then that guitar ended up on the cover of Vintage Guitar
That's
magazine.
Wow.
Sweet.
So when Mike Bloomfield had this thing painted purple,
yeah.
what did he just take it into Earl Scheib?
Yeah.
Well, how
Well,
do you do it?
so this is the funny.
Scraping.
Well, I
This
mean-
is the funny thing. I mean, there's so much.
Do you know who Earl Scheib is?
Yeah.
I just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure.
Yeah.
Any
I'll
guitar,
paint it.
anytime.
99.95.
I'll paint any guitar, any color.
love
right?
it.
Well, so this is the thing. I had the guitar on display at
Oh,
Fling
God.
Guitars for years, and I get a call one afternoon from a professor at Northwestern University, and he's like, "There's a rumor that you have Mike Bloomfield's Purple Strat." I said, "Yeah, it's here." He says,
Yeah, but it's
"My
right."
daughter painted that guitar for
Oh,
Mike
my.
because she dated Mike when he had the
Oh,
guitar."
my
no
God.
kidding.
Wow.
That is
So if you look
crazy.
through all the chips and dings,
right.
through the candy apple red is the purple paint
That is
underneath.
too wild.
And if you take the neck out of the neck socket, the original finish is that sunburst is still in there, and
Very
it has got the I think the greatest history in a guitar that I've
Right?
ever
That is
ever
cool.
come
Amazing.
across. So
Well, next time bring the guitar.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna bring the guitar and the album,
Yes.
all signed by Rick and all that.
Absolutely.
We're gonna spin that record for the 5 millionth time.
Yeah, right. That's a great album.
It's a great album. It's a great
See?
album.
You should order it.
I have it in the archive.
Yeah, the archives, yeah.
So bring
Yeah,
your white
temperature
gloves.
control.
Yeah, temperature.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're coming to touch the record, bring your
Yeah,
white,
bring
bring your white
bring-
gloves.
I don't know if it's in the back or if it's at
So you know what? We
the
have to
collection.
talk about getting that guitar into the
Warehouse too, yeah, in the back 40.
The Illinois?
museum. Yes,
Oh, that'd be a piece of cake, I'm sure.
that would be a nice draw to bring
Oh, are you
people to the
kidding?
museum. There you go. I also have the number 1000001 Dean prototype Flying V that is also on display at Dave's in La Crosse.
Oh, far out.
So we have some iconic guitars that we can lend for the cause.
There you go. See, guitar podcast. That's
Wow.
next.
Oh, Mark
Does
and
Ron
Jim
know
might-
about this? He'll be happy.
No, but
Mark and Jim might even come back for that.
it's coming
Wow.
out.
We're
Well,
gonna
they
have to set up another one where we just sit here and talk music
How,
trivia.
how,
Right.
how about getting your
Ron?
bandmate Jerry to contribute one of his old beat up
Violins.
violins?
Well, believe it or not, he doesn't have any. He still has the Mahavishnu blue violin.
Is that that's the one he uses now?
No, that's a
Because it's blue.
yeah,
it's-
but that's a custom made one.
Oh,
but the
okay.
one he used in Mahavishnu, it's not even playable now. It's just been sitting around forever.
you know, I the way I kind of touched base with him. You know, I said, Jerry used to live down the block. I went to your elements. We went to the same elementary school. But I visited the Rock and Roll Museum in Phoenix, and they had a display of violins and prototype electric violins that had gone back to the 40s.
Wow.
So I took some pictures and I sent them to him over Facebook, and that was how he responded to me, because I thought he'd find it interesting.
Yeah.
And then I found a ticket for $5. Jerry Goodman at Biddy Mulligan's, a bar in Chicago,
On
Illinois,
Sheridan
near
Road.
Loyola
On
University, where I
Sheridan
went to school.
Very famous.
And
bar.
he was playing there for $5. And when you guys were playing the Arcada, I went in there and I said, "Man, you played cheap in those days. $5."
Well, everybody, I think a
Yeah.
Hendrix show was $5
Yeah.
Yeah,
back in
right.
the day, you know. But well, the funny thing is, and I don't know, you know, I hate to go into this. I don't know what kind of time you guys have, but when I had Flynn Guitars, Jerry Smith, the bass player from the Flock, he came into the store. He was our Ovation and Hamer rep. And he asked us, he's like, so you and your brother Mike, you're from Evanston? Yeah. He's like, well, where'd you grow up? And I said, well, in North Evanston. He's like, well, what street? I said, on Forest View. He's like, Forest View Road? I said, yeah. He's like, we used to practice in a house on Forest View Road, on the corner of Forest View and Grant. I said, that's across the street from my house.
That's crazy.
What band was this? Oh, it was the Flock. So when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, the Flock was rehearsing across the street, unbeknownst to me.
Isn't that wild?
Other than, of course, back in those days, there's no air conditioning. So when they were practicing in the summertime, we'd hear them and we'd run across
Right.
and look through the screens on the front porch and see them practicing.
Weren't they also
no
practicing
clue
at
who
Rick
it was.
Canoff's house?
This was at Rick Mann's house.
That
Okay,
is
Rick Mann's house,
awesome.
okay.
Right. So it again, as crazy as it is, and the story gets crazier, is that here I am playing with these guys, 50 years later. But when I was Jerry Goodman right now, he lives in Oregon. So I was driving him back to his friend's house in Highland Park after rehearsal one night, after the first time I met him in our first rehearsal together. He says, "Where do you live in Wisconsin?" I said, "Oh, it's this little town near Lake Geneva." He says, "No, specifically what town?" I said, "Oh, no, you wouldn't have never heard of this." He says, "What town?" I said, "In Elkhorn." Elkhorn? I used to live in Elkhorn. Like, what?
And I know
Yeah,
someone who
right.
lives
He
in
says,
Elkhorn.
when I left the Flock, I moved to Elkhorn. And when I got the
Why?
call from John McLaughlin in New York City to be in the Mahavishnu Orchestra, that was he was living in a farmhouse in Elkhorn.
That's crazy.
That's where he got the call to do that. So
Wow.
talk
You're
about
talking
it's a
about it.
small world.
I had to dig this
There
out.
it is.
So
The
there's
flock.
the flock.
There's one of the Flock albums.
Yeah.
And look, there's the word dinosaur in there.
Yeah.
Hey, see?
Yeah.
It's a
But-
double whammy.
So I look at all these crazy parallels in my life just to these guys. It's unbelievable. I mean, what are the chances?
I know. And
Elkhorn.
Pete,
Flea
I
guitars
have a
to
friend
Elkhorn
who
and all
lives,
that
who
stuff.
moved from Barrington to Elkhorn just recently, and he said, "Do you know where Elkhorn is?" And I said, "No."
Yeah.
And now,
And now,
Now you know.
Does
yeah.
anybody?
Guys, we're putting Lake Geneva and
Yeah,
Elkhorn
yeah,
on the
put it
map.
On the
okay?
map, right? Yeah.
So you're in Elkhorn now?
Yeah,
Annie's.
Annie's, right?
Annie's.
That's right. Annie's, Burger Town.
Love it.
So yeah, it's incredible when you meet people and the stories start to come out. How many parallels and things you
Oh,
have
God,
in common
yeah.
with
My
people
wife
and things you
my
share
wife
with
and I live
people.
In the town between
So-
here and Elkhorn.
you too.
Yeah,
And that's all.
Boy, the place is
music
getting
brings
bigger
it all
by the
together.
second.
I mean, everybody branched out every which way, and like this story, this small tiny town to go over to New York.
Yeah,
It all comes back to the music.
that's right.
Yeah.
Music brings it all together.
And that's what we
It
talked
does.
about when I
Does.
walked in the store.
This is
Right, yeah.
10 hours
yeah.
ago.
what a way,
Yeah, yeah, right.
Tim. You are the master of tying up the interview.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
I like that.
I'll take that because I didn't
Yeah.
start it off very well.
Yeah, well, you were
Yeah,
warming
this is
up,
Joe
you
Smith
know.
and Bob.
It's-
Right. These two
Kinda
guys.
And then, we were a little. Pete walks in them like we're a little thrown off, Another.
Well, I told you I was
I
coming.
know you did, but
Actually, I thought this was just a book signing. I didn't know you guys were going to do this, so excuse me for
Actually,
barging.
You know,
well,
This is like Don
Are we
Rickles
still
coming
on
on
the-
Johnny Carson on the hour. You know?
derailing the
Joe,
whole thing.
Yeah,
Joe,
there goes the whole show.
Are we still on the air here?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, we had done this about 7 months ago.
Here?
Yeah, but
Oh,
there
the
was
first-
there
yeah.
were, as they say in the business, technical
We
difficulties.
had gremlins.
And they,
Gremlins,
started
you know.
showing a Three Stooges short because we had the
Yeah.
technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Do you remember that Twilight Zone where that little creature's
Oh, they're showing the
out on
Three
the wing?
Stooges show
Yeah.
right now.
You know, the Twilight
Which
Zone
one?
is chewing on the wing.
Right.
Well, there was one of
Oh,
those
yeah.
things in the Facebook mechanisms, and
Right.
it was inaudible. Correct, Joel?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So,
Which is why we're on YouTube now. And I mentioned that
oh,
reference yesterday at the car wash.
did I say?
The what?
No, because they
Oh,
were
yeah,
broadcasting.
right.
on
Okay, yeah.
Facebook,
No, we're streaming it live on YouTube now.
Awesome.
But
All
this is, see, I think we said this the last time too, that it didn't even matter because we're just sitting here bouncing stuff off of each
We
other.
were here like.
Different stories.
I know
and-
we were just going back and forth. and
Right.
You were getting into it, and Joe was getting into it, and your guests were getting it.
Because that's the cool thing about it, is like somebody says one thing and, oh God, that's right, I remember. Well, when you're done, I got to tell this story, and then I'll tell one, and then you'll remember something. Oh, on that, yeah. and
Well,
then
what
this
did
happened,
they
and-
say? A picture tells.
That's
A
right.
thousand
There
thousand
you go.
words.
There you
That's
go.
it.
There you
So
go.
go out and do yourself a favor and pick this book up. A lot of amazing photos and stories that go behind the rock and roll. Two great guys here. And Pete
And
joining
Pete.
it. And two great guys and Pete.
Yeah, and this other guy.
And this other guy.
A real musician right here.
I was going to say, and Pete, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
No, it's great,
and not
guys.
throwing me
Thank you,
out.
Tim.
I'm so glad you guys
Thank you,
came
Tim.
back.
This was
This was
even.
fantastic.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for stepping in, buddy.
Always, always.
Now I'm telling you, next time we just got to come back and we'll just sit here and tell stories.
Okay.
We'll
Sounds
just
good.
talk music
That's
trivia.
Do they have to be true, though?
Our favorite.
Can we mix
to
them
a
up?
certain extent.
Okay. True-ish?
True-ish.
Okay, we can
Because
do
let's
true-ish.
face it, you can tell whatever you want. Nobody's going to know the difference.
That's true.
Well, they will now because I just told them.
No, we'd love to
Blew
come
it.
back. We'd
But
love to
no,
come back.
man, I mean, it's like, and I'm sure you can tell, it just bouncing stuff off of each other. I'm like a little kid. I get so excited telling stories, you know what I mean, about music. And it's funny because people come in here and we'll start rolling, and the more excited I get, the louder
Here,
I
I'll
talk.
get you. I'll get you excited.
Like, why are you yelling at me? I thought we were talking
I'll
music.
get
we were
you
friends.
excited. The first concert I ever saw was
Better rephrase
Jefferson
that.
Airplane at the.
Rephrase that.
What did I say?
I'm going to get you excited.
Well, no,
Hey, this is a family show.
I want to get you. The first concert I saw in high school was the Jefferson Airplane at the Aragon Ballroom. Grace Slick took her top off
Hey,
and got me excited.
the rest was rock and
The rest
roll
was
history.
rock and roll history.
All right, so for next time, I have a story about Rory Gallagher and Grace Slick at the Aragon.
Oh, I can't wait for
At the
that.
Aragon Ballroom.
Can't wait for that.
Until next time.
Teaser.
Ooh.
That's right.
I just
Teaser.
got in an
That's what a
album
teaser.
that probably nobody has ever seen. Grace Slick and her husband before Jefferson Airplane, the Great
Not Darby?
Society.
Darby Slick.
No, the Great Society.
Yeah,
oh,
that
her
was
husband.
husband,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. That was their first band before the Airplane.
Yes, it was. Yes.
Her husband wrote White Rabbit
Yes.
and Somebody to Love.
Yes.
They did they never did an album. They just had live recordings from like the Fillmore and places like that. They did a show at the Whiskey with Jefferson Airplane. They loved her so much they kicked out the original singer, told her to join. Now you take this however you want it. She left the husband, took his two songs, joined the band. It made him famous
Really?
with somebody
Wow,
else.
didn't
Yeah.
know that. Wow.
Yeah. And there was only one member of the Airplane that she did not have an affair with. But we'll save that
Yeah,
for the next
that's another
interview.
story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Grace Slick and her affairs. Tune
Yes.
in next time. Right? All right, guys. Well,
Okay.
this has been fantastic, man. I
Thank you, Tim.
appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
and sharing this with us.
Thank
It's
you
a
very
great
much.
book.
All right.
Really.
Thank you.
For those who
Pete. It
stood
was
the 2 hours with us,
what a
thank you.
surprise. Thank you
Right,
so
right.
much.
The marathoners.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Look for our new live podcasts. Joel, who do we got coming up next?
Sunday, 5 o'clock, Marie Martin's in the mess.
Yes, Marie Martin's and the Mess Arounds. Great blues band from Antioch, Illinois. So come on in and hang out or catch us live on YouTube. Peace, everybody. Rock and roll. Right on, guys.
Do you know the opening band that played?